Okay, good morning, committee. Everybody is here. I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is currently 9 a.m. and I'd like to confirm that all members are present and we have quorum. We do have most of our committee is here in the room with us, but we do also have a hybrid setting. So we have one of our committee members is actually online. So for those sitting in the audience, just so you know that we actually have a council member sitting in the Zoom world. I'd also like to confirm that our CAO clerk and other members of our senior management team are here and present. And I don't believe any public comments have been received, but again, for those of you in the public, anybody listening, if you do have comment, please send those to tmlpubliccomment@muskokalakes.ca. Today's meeting is being live streamed and recorded on the Township of Muskoka website and YouTube channel. By participating in this open public meeting today, you are consenting to your image, voice, and comments being recorded and posted online. I would like to acknowledge that we do have a supplementary agenda today. We have Mr. Kevin Trimble from the Muskoka Watershed Council, and he is here to provide an update. So welcome. At this point, I'd like to ask if anybody has any kind of pecuniary interest committee. Okay, Mayor Kelley.
Thank you, and through you. I actually have a couple. I actually only have the numbers, so I can't really describe them as specifically as I would like, but numbers 8B and 8C involve property that is less than 100 feet from some real estate that I own. And so I'm going to declare a conflict there and recuse. Number 10B. 10B is the fee waiving for service groups. I'm on the executive board of the Port Carling Lions Club, so I'll be recusing myself from that as well. 4A, I'm not 100% clear. There's a presentation in 4A that involves charging stations, one of which is proposed to be on this piece of real estate here, which also is within 100 feet of some real estate that I own. And there's a vote mentioned later on. I don't know, I haven't seen a resolution, so I'm not 100% sure, but I'm going to recuse just so that I don't influence the outcome through facial grimacing or whatever. So I just want to make sure that that's on, there is a resolution that comes up, I think in 10A or something. I think I got that. I think that's it. That's good. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Mayor Kelley will be only a part of today's meeting, which makes my goal of meeting by 12 a bit more achievable. Sorry, I had to say it. It had to be said, sorry. Okay, thank you. Any other disclosures? Okay, seeing none. I think that's it. Just a quick note on motions. These have been pre-populated with random movers and seconders to expedite this meeting. And from a voting perspective, members will physically raise their hand until the chair has confirmed the vote. If the vote is unclear, a verbal vote shall be recorded by the clerk. This is not considered a recorded vote. So just going off yesterday's conversation as well. Thank you. Okay, at this point, we will be moving on to items 4A. And just so I am clear, where does the supplementary agenda come in? It's right here. Okay, and is B here? We don't know. Okay, so at this point, we're moving into our delegations portion of the meeting. I guess, Mayor Kelley, you'll be leaving the room and we will have an opportunity to hear from Peter and Vince. Thank you. From Lakeland Solutions.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Vince Kulchycki. I'm Chief Operating Officer of Lakeland Holding. I'm just here to talk. There you go. Check 1, 2. I'm Vince Kulchycki for Lakeland Holding. It's a wholly owned municipal corporation. So Bracebridge, Huntsville, Brooks Falls, Sunridge, Magnetawan, and Perry Sound. We operate several divisions. One of them is Lakeland Power, which is a power distribution company in those municipalities. The other one is Bracebridge Generation. We own 11 water power plants across Ontario and in Quebec as well. And the other division is Lakeland Networks, which is a internet division, mainly fiber optics from really all the way to South River and over to Perry Sound. We have about 9,000 customers in that company as well. Lakeland Solutions is a division of Lakeland Generation. When you let Peter do some talking about our EV charger program.
Thank you, Vince. Good morning, everybody. Next slide, please. Yeah, so just quickly, there's a lot of benefits to electric vehicles. Electric vehicles use a motor instead of an engine. Just to highlight the key one, I'm sure you've all read this, is there is a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, and that's important. Next slide, please. I'm sure you've all heard in the news, you can't really go a day anymore without hearing about an automaker releasing a new electric vehicle. Even so much so that the IESOs, the Ontario grid operator, is predicting a 20% growth in demand in electricity from electric transportation solely. So significant increase in demand for electric vehicles. So much to the point that this electric vehicle charging stations are actually becoming critical infrastructure. Next slide, please. There is different levels of charging, and just to address it on a very high level, there's a level 1, which would be 120 volt standard outlet in your home, or you plug in and charge. Level 2 would be more 240 volt, higher amperage, and a faster charging. And then the highest is a level 3, also known as a direct current fast charger or DC fast charger. These are the typical public charging stations which can charge a vehicle very rapidly. Next slide, please. So I like to talk kilowatts and kilowatt hours. I'm a bit of an energy nerd, but what most people want to know is how long does it take to charge an electric vehicle? And we've broken it down just very simply. If you need 200 kilometers on an average electric vehicle, if you take a level 2 charger at 7 kilowatts, that'll take about 4.2 hours to get those 200 kilometers. In a level 3 direct current fast charger at 30 kilowatts, that would take approximately 1 hour. And then on the higher end at 180 kilowatt charger, to get 200 kilometers on an average vehicle, you could take about 10 minutes to get that kind of range. And so that's just a little bit of background on Lakeland's network of EV charging infrastructure. Next slide, please. We currently own 12 EV charging stations right now. We are in development of 40 more, and this is through the federal government's ZEVIT program funding. Developing EV charging, public charging stations is very expensive. There's a lot of investment in grid infrastructure, transformation costs, the chargers themselves, civil work. So at this point, for a suitable rate of return, funding is required. We are currently investing over 1 million in these 40 charging stations we're putting in our municipalities, the local municipalities that Vince mentioned earlier. And there is another round of funding coming this fall. So we are preparing for phase 2 of our Take Charge project, and that is why we're here today, because timing is critical. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, we have a network of charging stations already, and we are expanding that as we speak in the Muskoka Perry Sound area. We are working with a partner called Switch on our networking back end. They're a Toronto-based firm who's been in the EV space for a long time. They have over 5,000 charging plugs and over 900 stations across North America. And the great thing about Switch is they're an open protocol platform, meaning you can use apps, basically charging from anywhere with multi-apps. We also have a local installer. Next slide, please. So we have discussed with Muskoka Lake staff, the council has already made some recommendations on looking at future EV charging. We've looked at those, we've looked at sites with staff, and we want to explore that further, but we do have some high level options. Next slide, please.
Just a reminder that you're at 5 minutes because
Okay.
I know we're getting to the ask.
Yes.
I think that's the important side
Okay.
to focus on.
Thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate that. So we do have a couple options, but I'll get you to next, skip the slide, please. Port Carling and Bala options. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Perfect. Thank you. So yes, we want to review those sites with staff in detail, but our ask is this: because of the critical timing for the funding, we're hoping that the council would agree to sign a letter of intent to work with Lakeland, take charge, Lakeland Solutions, to pursue the application to the ZEVIT program for funding to put EV charging stations within your municipality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a very good presentation going to high level. So I appreciate the time you put into doing that today. Thank you.
You're welcome.
At this point, what will happen, I will open up the floor for questions. And then as you all know, we will have a further discussion later in today's agenda. And then our clerk will follow up with you to let you know what the next steps may be. So
Excellent.
at this point, I'm going to open up the floor for questions. So committee, does anybody have questions? Okay, Councillor Nishikawa, and then Councillor Bosemuth, and then Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. It's more of a procedural question to you, whomever could answer your question. If we don't choose a site today, the letter of intent, I'm not sure where that leaves us. If we just have a letter of intent out there that we're interested in this, but we don't have an actual site chosen. I don't know how that sits from a procedural perspective.
I think our CAO would like to chime in.
So Madam Chair, as committee's probably aware, we have a couple delegations with these types of requests. So I think the matter should likely be referred back to staff. We'd come back with a report with options as to how to go forward with respect to, do we want to entertain a request for proposals? Do we want to just enter into agreements with people that approach us? A couple of approaches that we can take. So I think we need to evaluate those options, come back and make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bosemuth.
That effectively answered my question.
Thank you. This is easy. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. The first question, I had two questions. The first question is to the delegate. You've asked for a letter of intent. What would be the timeline? When do you need a response from the township? That was my first question.
Great question. Thank you. We're expecting the announcement for the funding in September. So as long as it's pre-September, I think we'd be okay.
Okay, thank you. And my second question to you, I suggest that I know the Milford Bay community and possibly other Muskoka hamlets, as well as small business owners throughout Muskoka Lakes, may wish to discuss with Lakelands how they would go about partnering with Lakelands to install charging stations. Who at Lakelands could they contact?
Fantastic. That's great. They could contact myself or Vince. Either of us would be more than happy to speak with you or any small business owner. Milford Bay, I believe, is part of Muskoka Lake. So any municipal site with the council, staff. Yep. But with us, that would be great.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kent, any questions?
I saw that in a proposal you put forth here, the model is you lease spaces from us. Are there any other ownership models that you've tried in the past with other municipalities, or is the only income stream we would have would be a leasing revenue and I guess some benefit for special charging?
Right. Good question. Thank you very much for that. So yes, we have signed now 7 leases with 7 separate municipalities for electric vehicle charging stations. And that is the approach that we've seen works well for municipalities. Typically, they don't want to invest. And because these stations are very expensive to build, that's why we're asking for just a lease of the actual parking space. by offering incentives for future fleet electric vehicles and possibly staff, discounted rates for the municipality. We can definitely look at that, but we're also open to other options. If Muskoka Lakes wanted to invest and have shared ownership, we'd be happy to discuss that.
Just want to know if there are other options.
Absolutely. Yep.
Thank you. Great question. Committee, any other questions? Councillor Edwards.
Yes, thank you. I see you're proposing level 2 and level 3 stations. Why would you want to put level 2 in? And that when it takes what, 4.5 hours to charge for 200 kilometers?
Great question. I'm glad you asked that. So one of the really nice features of electric vehicles is you do get that option for charging times. If you know, at this location, for example, there is eventually a fleet vehicle that is electric, you would want to charge that slower overnight. So you would want that level 2 for that specific purpose. Or if somebody's here for the day for a meeting or afternoon for a meeting, charging at level 2 is actually more efficient, better for the vehicle. If somebody's passing through or needs that charge quickly, then we'd also have that level 3. So providing different levels gives the user lots of options, and certain applications or certain chargers fit the user's experience better. Perhaps you're walking down to the beach for the afternoon with your kids. A level 2 would be perfect for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Good questions. Committee, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation today. As I mentioned, the clerk will follow up and let you know what the appropriate next steps are.
Fantastic. Thanks
Okay,
very much.
Thank you. Thanks both. Okay, that was item 4A. Perhaps somebody can looks like the CA. Thank you. Kush Aubrey? Item 4B, is he here or in the? Okay. Okay. Is it Kush Aubrey? If you could turn your camera on, please. If you can hear me. Did you say it's Ms. or Mr. Ms. Aubrey? Okay, Kush Aubrey, if you are in the waiting room, we just need you to put your camera on. If you can hear me. Yeah, is there a way to contact them or? Oh, they're there. Thank you. Okay, welcome. Okay, you are on mute. If you want to take yourself off mute, Mr. Aubrey, that's great.
Hello, sorry about that. It was I was on camera, but then it deleted it when I joined the meeting. Good morning, everyone.
Okay, Mr. Aubrey, you have 5 minutes and welcome to the township, and I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the time, everybody. I will keep this brief. This is probably my 5th or 6th township council meeting in this role at Ivy, so we can move right through. I've made it very, very simple. Quick background about us and EV charging, an executive summary of what we've discussed so far with some of your colleagues, a summary of a single charging site, just to give you an idea of what this project looks like, and then finally, business models for EV charging and next steps. So we can move ahead with the background. For those of you who aren't aware of Ivy Charging Network, we're one of Ontario's largest and definitely the most widespread in Ontario, going all the way from Kenora and Dryden out in the west near the border of Manitoba, all the way to the border of Ottawa. Excuse me. And then as far south as the border with Windsor and Detroit. We operate over 160 EV charging stations in the province across 80 locations. And our most famous ones are at the en routes on the 400 series highways. So most Ontarians who use our charging network, they see us at the en route and then they use us elsewhere probably afterwards. I want to say they probably get 40% of our charging sessions along the 400 series highways, as you can expect. What's good is, charging is a very evolving industry. We have staying power. We've been founded by OPG and Hydro One. They're 50-50 joint partners in Ivy. We were actually started as a project between the two utilities. So the biggest generator, the biggest transmitter and distributor, that's who's backing us. And it's allowed us to take on more ambitious projects, more long-term vision projects, because we have long-term partners in both of them. So a bit of background on us and, and who we are and where we come from. I believe we can move forward a little bit on EV charging. So I can't really see the room, but if you could raise your hands and let me know, how many of you have driven an electric car in the past? Okay, we got a couple. Great. All right. And every time I ask that question, I see more hands than before. There's times in the past where I get crickets, so that's good to see. Level 2 and level 3 charging. Just want to talk about the difference here. Level 1, you don't see on the slide. That's the plug that your laptop is in right now off the wall. It's not enough power to really charge an EV. It takes hours and hours and hours. Some people use it at home. It's good if you drive very little every day, but level 1 is the plug on your wall, 110 volts. Level 2 is a plug that your dryer uses or the plug that your jacuzzi uses. It's a higher voltage plug, and that's why we call it level 2. There's still a bit of a power band in there. It's not a fixed power, voltage just determines a bit of it. So level 2 is a bit nicer. We always say, if it's going to be longer than an hour or 2 hours of parking, level 2 is probably the way to go. Level 3 is a fast stuff. This is what Tesla is famous for. This is what everyone talks about in the press releases. This is even higher voltage. Industrial or commercial voltage is what gets you to level 3. 480 volts or higher is the voltage that we connect to for this. This is a quick stop. This is a 20 to 40 minute stop on average in our network. I also call this the behavior modifier. People don't often go out of their way for a level 2 charge. If they're going to a hotel or a restaurant, they have it, great. I'll plug into level 2. If they're going to a destination and a different route has a level 3 charger, they will take that different route. I'm one of those people. I've been using electric vehicles for over 2 years, and last summer I went camping. My wife and we took a detour through Exeter, Ontario on the way back from Goderich just to hit a level 3 charger that was in a parking lot there. So that's also the one that brings in more people. Not that your township actually has that issue. We can move forward. Quick time check. So quick summary. I think this is the important slide. So we started talking with the district actually earlier this year, and just talked about our process and how we do things. We identified 7 potential charging locations that could benefit the community, could benefit visitors, and had the space potentially to put in a charging station. I'll show you one just to give you an idea today because of the time. And then lastly, we looked at business models. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say you're closing in on 5 minutes, so.
Oh, okay. I'll skim on this. So pro charging site example. Don's Bakery parking lot. It's already been discussed. Would be a good DC fast charging spot. And there's a picture at the bottom, a rudimentary mock-up of 2 chargers that look larger than life because they're actually a bit smaller. We can skip the slide. I'd skip this one too because it's a little bit busy, and then go to the end. I have details in there about business models. So we just wanted to join the council meeting and discuss this with you. I've been working with Corey, Lauren as well, to talk about this, just to get your feedback on the locations, the business models, and timing of when EV charging could make sense. And then if we get the green light from council, we can prepare the below. And again, no commitment required, but preparing an estimate, giving you an idea of what it looks like, time-wise, cost-wise. And lastly, business models for each site. I want to highlight one thing about business models. Ivy is willing to bring all the capital to a property for hardware, installation, construction, and either share in the risk of ownership with a partner, so some kind of a split, or we're able to do charging as a service and bring you a charger and you keep all the revenue and you pay the bills. In a high traffic area, that's much more advantageous for a site host. In a medium traffic area, the payback takes longer. So those are the two. Corey did mention in the past that the township wasn't looking to take owner-operator responsibility. So Ivy is willing to be that operator long-term. maintenance, service, 24/7 support. We have all that capability in-house. Sorry for rushing at the end there. I hope this was informative, and there is more information in the appendix and in a couple slides. So I will await your feedback once you're able to review.
Thank you very much. And I think I'm going to start by asking if you could send that presentation to our clerk. Then as a group, we will receive that after the fact.
Yep.
And just as I mentioned in the previous delegate, I will open up the conversation now to committee for questions for you. As noted on our agenda, we will be discussing next steps of EV charging stations later on in the agenda, and then our clerk will follow up with you to let you know what the appropriate next steps are after today. Okay? So at this
Understood.
point, yep, at this point, committee, do we have any questions? Councillor McIntyre.
Morning. My question would be, any sort of analysis that I have seen done of charging stations has always outlined the number of problems there are. For example, highway driving, and you get to the en route thing and the charging stations aren't working, they're not whatever, they're not being maintained properly. How do you address that concern?
Great question, and important question. And give you some background on me. I've been doing EV charging since 2016. I come from the automotive industry, and that problem's been there for a while. New technology tends to have growing pains, is how we, explain it, but how we actually address it. Number one, all of our sites have more than one charging unit. That's a best practice we've adopted, because if a charger is down, which they will go down at some point in time, like most hardware and equipment out there, they're getting more reliable as a basis. But even when they do for a software glitch, you have a second or third or fourth option. So I did an analysis of some of our sites for an RFP recently. Even sites that had a 90% or lower uptime of a single charger would have a 97% or higher uptime if you include both chargers in that calculation. So redundancy, that's the simple one. It's simple, it's basic, but redundancy is number one. Number two, we're building out a service network that is stronger. So we're all over Ontario. Our GTA sites, it's easy to get service contractors there. But our operations manager, he's been in the company for a year now, just as long as I have. He comes from ABB, and he used to fix chargers. He was a service engineer. He's finding a network of service providers spread across Ontario so he can get dispatched same day to fix problems. And then lastly, it's the hardware you choose. Some of the hardware we chose in 2019 looked great on paper, looked phenomenal on paper. But we realized that, some of that high-tech stuff requires more maintenance and more work. So you're looking at us putting in more modest equipment with proven reliability and a proven part supply moving forward. So some of those decisions, of course, are now moving forward. Some of them are retroactive. We can apply to old sites. If you look at our procurement for hardware this year, reliability, serviceability, and a proven local service network are top of mind for our procurement of new charging stations. So it's a question I ask everyone. As of right now, I want to say we have 3 different service vendors that can do expert level service, and we're also engaging with the ESA. They have a contractor locator tool on their website. Pretty good if you even have to do work in your house, to find local electricians to do basic service for us. Sometimes, just like with a computer, all you got to do is turn the charger on and off and things work again. To send a specialized tech from Toronto all the way up to do that in a day, that was not smart of us in the past. So we're finding local electricians, signing contracts with them to go into their neighborhood, switch the charger on and off and fix it. So all this to say, we're seeing improvements in our processes and we're seeing improvements in the hardware. So those are valid concerns from a lot of folks. There's also light at the end of the tunnel. Tesla has done it very well, right?
Mm-hmm.
They own the chargers, they own the cars, they understand their infrastructure very well. And I think everyone has learned a bit from what they've done with their private network in the past. So that's how I would answer that question.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's fine. Okay, just committee, any other questions? Councillor Edwards?
Yes, thank you. You say your level 3 quick charge takes about 20 to 40 minutes. How far can I go if I have a car? Like, would that give me 200, 400, 600, 800 kilometers?
The short answer is it all depends. Unlike with fuel, No one's ever asked you, hey, how many liters per second does Petro-Canada pump into your gas tank? Because you just know it's going to be pretty quick. With EV charging, you're putting in electrons at a high rate of power into a battery. So number one, how big is your battery? You know, the Nissan Leaf can go, I think, 250, 300 kilometers. The Tesla Model Y long range can go 500. So you already have a limitation with what car you're sitting in. The second thing is, what's your starting percentage of charge and your ending percentage of charge? It takes less time to fill a small battery than a big battery. So I'll use a basic run-of-the-mill example. I use this one quite a bit. You're in a new Kia or Hyundai product, you know, the batteries, I think it's like 80 or 90 kilowatt hours. In about 30 minutes, you should be able to get all the way up to 80, 85%. And you should be able to gain 300 or so kilometers in that time in those vehicles. In a basic, you know, average day, average temperature, if your battery's preconditioned and everything is working like, you know, perfect, 20 minutes perhaps for that. So it's a weird answer to say it's not a fixed number. It really isn't. Charging is a curve. And I'll add one more thing. If you ever tried to fill a kiddie pool or a bucket with a fire hose, you'd fill that first 80% super quick. But at the end, you're going to have to taper off the fire hose to slowly fill the rest of the bucket. Otherwise, water's sloshing everywhere. Batteries are the same. You can fill the first 80% really well, but at the end, you have to taper off that power to fill the battery slowly. And that's why you'll see all of our commercials, all the car companies, they always say fast charging up to 80%, because beyond 80%, fast charging is very hard. And when you go to a charging station, you see someone parked there and they're at 92, you ask them, hey, excuse me, you know, ma'am, excuse me, sir, can you please move off the charger? Because you're slowly charging that battery. I need to get mine in. So that's one little difference. Yeah, so to answer the question, about 300 kilometers, depending on the car. Could be even more if it's a low weight, higher range vehicle. But yeah, that's what I'd expect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The committee, is there any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much again for coming today. And if I could ask that you send that presentation, I think that would be very helpful for staff, and we will follow up with you as to whatever the next steps may be.
Sure, I want to share. Persephone and Crystal already have that, but I will send them over to. Yeah.
Fantastic. We'll
Okay,
just make sure
sounds
that the committee members have that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Council. Have a good rest of the day.
Have a great
Bye
day.
now.
Take care. Okay, moving on to item 4C, another delegation, Alexandra Ehrlich. Is that correct? Thank you. Welcome. Yeah, you come up there and you have 5 minutes. 5 minutes like everybody else. Just introduce yourself, please, first.
My name is Alexandra Ehrlich, and I am wanted to speak in support of an application for conveyance of a portion of the original Kings Grant Highway, which became Peninsula Road. In 1966, the road was rerouted, and most portions of the old road along Cumberland Bay and Lake Joseph were conveyed to their abutting lot owners. For some reason, the road abutting our landing property was not conveyed, though it de facto became our private driveway that dead ended in a thicket that grew up in the neighbor's property. We have been the sole maintainers of this property for almost 60 years. When researching why it was still deemed a road, I was told once that it was designated a walking trail, but it is only about 50 meters long, so it's not a very good walking trail. I realized that it had most likely been retained because there had been a 15-foot water access many decades ago at the end of it. But that water right-of-way was closed by another bylaw in the 1980s. So we're requesting that this roadway be conveyed to our lot because we feel it makes sense for both us and the township. It clears up some confusion about who should care for the road, and it makes official what's been a de facto status quo since the 1960s. I've read the report, and we are in agreement with including any easements for drainage or any other necessities required by the township to allow this to go through. And we are happy to pay all fees and do any necessary final paperwork. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. So we will be hearing from staff. Just, do we ask questions at this point? Okay. Committee, do we have any questions, knowing that we are going to be talking about this at item getting 6A. Thank you. Okay, committee, questions for the,
Thank you. I was through you to the applicant, sorry, I'm not sure. I'm at my question. Yes, come on. Sorry, I wasn't aware. I'm not sure because I'm just going off your last name. I'm not quite sure. Are you the property owner?
I am one of 4 property owners. My sister is one of the other property owners. I have a cousin who's on YouTube watching you guys for this meeting because she had to leave town, and another cousin who's out of town and also watching.
Thank you.
excellent, thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Okay, so we have at this point our supplementary agenda. This would be under the classification of invited presentations, using some of the language from yesterday, I believe, right? And so I'd like to welcome Kevin Trimble from the Muskoka Watershed Council. Under that, guys, he has a bit longer than the 5 minutes. He'll probably be between 10 and 12 minutes, I think, up to a bit there. Okay, thank you. Welcome.
Thanks very much, and apologies for the title on the presentation. It was the last minute change late last night. Thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Kevin Trimble, and I'm a past chair recently of the Muskoka Watershed Council. I'm a director, and I'm currently co-chair of our integrated watershed management team. Next slide, please. I would like to just spend a couple of minutes focusing briefly on just who we are for those who don't know, how we distinguish ourselves, some trends coming out of our imminent latest watershed report card, and also some notes on why we think we all need to be thinking about integrated watershed solutions. Next slide. Watershed Council is an independent incorporated NGO. We've been around for over 20 years now. We're entirely volunteer driven. We've historically drawn on a strong relationship with the District of Muskoka, including mostly in-kind supports in the past. We're the only environmental organization in Muskoka that puts a big emphasis on providing policy advice to municipalities. Next slide, please. We've recently gone through a strategic planning exercises and updated our mission statement to better reflect kind of what we do. And basically we do 3 things. We empower the community through outreach, things like our report card, through policy advice, primarily to municipalities, and by adding to the science base in the Muskoka watershed through projects like our blue-green algae monitoring project, which has really taken off in the last couple of years. Next slide, please. Some comments on the report card, which is, as I said, coming out imminently. A key message in the report card is that while a snapshot shows that our current environment is relatively healthy, there's a number of combined trends that are an increasing cause for concern. And it's clear to us that our current forms of environmental management and land use planning aren't going to be adequate if we keep the status quo with these combined trends that we're seeing. Next slide, please. Just a few examples out of the report card. We have a progressive loss of calcium from our lakes. This is now serious enough that many of our lakes are so calcium poor that we have organisms, key organisms in food chains that are having difficulty building their skeletons. And this is actually starting to compromise some of the food chains, food webs in our lake systems. Next slide, please. Our lakes are also getting saltier. I think some of you have heard some discussion on this before. All the lakes in this graph, except for the ones on the extreme left, are being artificially enhanced with salt or enriched with salt from our roads. And those that go more than 10 milligrams per liter are actually becoming compromised again, with ecologically important species being impacted by those increasing salt levels every year. Next slide. We're seeing a number of climate trends. We did a climate change report in 2016 with some analysis on local weather station data. We've recently updated that for the report card that's coming out, and we're seeing we have long-term trends that are ramifying their effects and starting to become more obvious in the Muskoka region. One is that we now have 36 days more of rain than we did 100 years ago. So the trend is going up, and the annual precipitation levels are going up. So we're getting into a wetter climate. Next slide, please. Ice cover. Another climate change that we're seeing is a shortening season for ice cover on our lakes. This is important for the construction industry, snowmobilers, ice fishing enthusiasts, but the change is also altering the ecological balance in our lakes. We're not exactly sure how yet, but we know there are ecological ramifications of this. Next slide, please. We didn't used to see a lot of, or even hear about blue-green algal blooms, but we're now getting them in much more frequent occurrences. And a recent study authored partially by people from the Dorset Environmental Research Center is indicating that this isn't just because people are reporting blooms more now that they know more about them. There's actually a lot more blooms happening, and particularly in our area. Next slide, please. So we've got some like climate trends showing up. And we have individual ones like the ones I mentioned, some water quality, some terrestrial issues that show up in our report cards. We're also seeing, more erratic weather patterns. Frequency of our flood events are changing. And we're also seeing changes and increases in development pressures on our waterfront, urban and rural areas. And when you start to combine all of these individual trends and think about them as a collection of trends, we're very concerned about the long-term health of the ecosystem in the Muskoka River watershed. Next slide, please. But one of the big things we're really missing in the watershed here is that the watershed is a landscape area. It's a unit of land that generates our water, all of our hydrologic processes, wildlife, forests, our water quality, and many of our ecological processes and services that we depend on for recreation and our economic drivers. For instance, we have almost 94,000 hectares of wetland in the Muskoka River watershed, and a recent study shows we have up to 19,000 kilometers of headwater tributaries. And we alter those features pretty regularly and we don't fully understand the implications of doing that in the watershed, but they all have important ecological functions that combine to affect many of the trends I mentioned earlier. And when we make changes to one of those components in the system, those changes are felt in all of the other components. So if we don't understand how the entire system operates, next slide, please. We can very easily make decisions that we think will fix one problem or one issue while damaging other aspects or other issues that we have lurking in the background. We could also be missing out on huge opportunities to fix multiple problems with the same project dollars. So again, if we don't understand the system, we, for instance, wouldn't know what kind of infrastructure to build, how big to build it, or where to put it in the watershed. So in a nutshell, single purpose projects are like putting Band-Aids on. And we really all need to collectively be thinking about achieving multiple objectives for the same dollars we spend on many of our municipal projects, and have a watershed perspective on those. Next slide, please. So the only way we can really address that collection of trends that are affecting overall ecosystem health is to start to allow ecosystem processes into our decision making processes for business models, infrastructure planning, land use planning, et cetera. And the only way to do that is to really move those decisions up to an ecosystem scale, because a municipality is not an ecosystem. Ecosystems cross municipal boundaries. And the most convenient unit used is the watershed. And I'll get to that in a couple of minutes when I talk about watershed planning. We have 17 municipalities in the Muskoka River watershed. And all of us are doing the best that we can, but we don't have tools and information that provide a watershed context and a multidisciplinary context to allow us to really look at solutions to that collection of problems that we have. Plus, in addition to land use and municipal issues, we have no flood management system at the watershed scale. Our dams were not designed for flood management. And the water management plan that we have has extremely limited capacity to deal with floods. The Muskoka River Water Management Plan deals with water only after it gets in our larger rivers and big lakes, really. And only for, it only manages for power, navigation, and fish. So there's no watershed scale context and no analysis of what's going on in the headwater regions that might be affecting flooding. Next slide, please. So integrated watershed management, it's not new. I'll get to that in a minute. It's a very useful tool that would allow us to coordinate our multidisciplinary watershed-wide management goals for climate action implementation, land use planning, infrastructure planning, and water management, so that we can implement watershed-wide goals, still doing it autonomously at a local scale. IWM has been implemented all over Ontario, all over North America, the European Union, and even in developing countries. But we haven't attempted to do it in the Muskoka region at all yet. MWC began talking about this in about 2018, thinking about watershed hydrology models that have never been done. And this became the subject of a stewardship conference we held in 2019 that just coincidentally coincided with the big flood we had that spring. And we later published a white paper, which is on our website, on the case for making the case for integrated watershed management. Next slide, please. So what's different about IWM compared to what we do now? Well, first of all, and this is our biggest issue right now today, it requires a big culture shift, especially where we don't have conservation authorities or an overarching agency. We have to get the entire community, the business community, and government all thinking about this stuff. And we need to be thinking about the watershed scale in all of our local decisions and actions. From a municipal perspective, the synergies and economies of scale that we can get out of this make a great business case for doing it, again, because we can achieve so many different or solve so many different problems with individual project designs. Next slide, please. A really key point I want to make is that unlike other parts of Ontario, what we've learned from case study reviews is that we don't have to add more layers of bureaucracy to municipal planning processes to bring IWM frameworks or implement IWM frameworks. But we also know that this is going to take time, and we're really just at the beginning of the process. Next slide, please. So it at the heart of it, it really recognizes the integrated nature of more successful environmental management processes. It's integrated across municipal boundaries. And again, as I said, we have 13 local area municipalities and 4 upper tier. It's comprehensive in that it allows us to pursue and design for competing and overlapping goals and issues rather than just solving one little piece at a time without knowing the implications on other parts of the ecosystem. And it's iterative in that we can go through the loop, learn, and go through the loop again, perhaps focusing on our most urgent problems first. And while that slide is up there, I'll just point out quickly that the main steps, you can't see it all, but we're in the stage at the top, which is characterizing how the watershed ecosystem works. The recent projects just done by the district focus primarily on that. So when we understand how the whole system works, what its vulnerabilities are, we can start to derive watershed-based goals to solve many of our problems and implement those locally with advice that each municipality can take on autonomously in their own corners of the watershed. Next slide, please. We have done an extensive case study review. We've had outside expertise and recently done a governance study, which is again on our website. We know that collaborative or co-governance models for governing this kind of thing can be very successful. We're not familiar very much with those in Ontario because most of our watershed plans are done by conservation authorities. And so it's overarching top-down processes. But we can see from the case study reviews, it's very possible to have a hybrid process, which isn't totally top-down. It's not bottom-up either. Where we build partnerships with all of the municipalities, business sectors, and major NGOs and community groups to move it forward. We have found, again, from particularly Quebec, Alberta, British Columbia, places like that, that those kinds of processes have the highest probability of success, and they instill high confidence in all of the stakeholders when they start from a collaborative or community-based process. So we have a project team and we have a roundtable, community roundtable started with about 45 initial members from all different sectors. We have a number of business communities, the water power sector, Indigenous communities, and the like. So we're starting to educate and we're hopefully building political will to really drive some of this forward. And we're also reaching out to municipalities. Our current activity is centered around the projects that were recently done. We're doing prioritized recommendations by scanning through everything that we know from those projects, prioritizing next steps, and hopefully connecting with the districts what they are currently involved with at their level, because they've extended some of their existing projects, but they'll be doing this similar kind of exercise. So in a nutshell, next slide, please. We're really hoping that we can get participation from all of the municipalities, including yours. We're going to be coming this fall. We're in a situation now where we really need money to start with some staff members to build that education level and political will, because all of this is being done completely by volunteers at the moment, and we're tapped out with our extension services. So I'm not making an ask today, but this is your heads up that we will be bringing something forward in the fall, and we're doing this with all of the local area municipalities in the area. So I will stop there.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, committee. Are there any questions for Mr. Trimble? I see I saw Mayor Kelley, then Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you, and through you. Great job, Kevin. I have a quick question for you. You mentioned 13, I'll just call them lower tiers, and 4 upper tiers. Do you have an idea how many of those 17 governance units already have dedicated personnel and resources working on this, and how many of them are just actually adrift and not focused on it at all?
Madam Chair, I would say probably none of them have focused staff. The district, because through MWC's work earlier on, got the provincial seed money that I think most of you should have heard about by now, where we did the 12, we actually did 16 projects, 12 were done by the district. They invested in staff and have some resources in-house now as a result of those projects, and they're hoping to keep the momentum going to keep some work going on. But from what we found through a round of presentations last year, we were able to get to 12 out of the 13 last year. We got high levels of interest, but it was in the lead up to an election. And you know, I don't know of water resources engineers in public works departments that are available and working on you know any of this or staff dedicated to it other than those. This is something that we have to start at the very beginning, and it's very much like the way we started our climate action work in 2016, where we recommended what ultimately led to the hiring of staff at the district to start the process of developing climate action plans.
Thank you. Councillor Zavitz and then Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, through you to our delegate. I guess the elephant in the room, the Muskoka Watershed was granted by Doug Ford and his group $5 million. Whatever happened to that money? And has your group been a recipient of some of it? And I guess I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. There were 4 members of MWC on among 9 appointed members by the Minister of Environment when that was announced. The recommendations that were made by that group after local stakeholder outreach and engagement led the minister to choose a cluster of projects and released the $5 million to do those projects. They came to us and said, who can handle this money in you know, less than 18 months? And we recommended the district for a fairly large group of them. So the district actually conducted 12 projects. The Muskoka Watershed Council got a very small grant for the governance study that I mentioned. The town of Bracebridge was funded to do an erosion and dredging sort of seed project for the mouth of the Muskoka River. And then there were two other projects. The Friends of the Muskoka Watershed received money to supplement their ash project, and Westwind Forestry got some money to do some experimental forest management. I think I counted them all, but there were 16. They're recently complete. We were really busy providing public comment on many of those projects. And so it's only really getting into this year now that we've been able to start to think, what do we do now? We have all this new knowledge on our watershed from those projects. I might also just add, sorry, there was a second $5 million that was supposed to come, didn't materialize. And we are now engaging the province. But we feel we can't really count on their leadership. We're hoping to count on their support and their engagement in the process as we move forward. We have some meetings coming up with the minister, but that's where we are with the provincial money.
Okay, thank you. Did you have a supplement? No. Okay, Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the delegate. What a excellent presentation and very informative, and it tweaks many interests that I have. But I have 3 questions. I'll keep it to 3 questions. I have more than 3 questions, but 3 questions. And the first one pertains to the salt load in our lakes. And I am assuming that, or I'm guessing that both the township and the district are probably some of the main contributors to that salt load, given their salting of roads in the wintertime for safety. What would you suggest both the district and the township can do to reduce the runoff of salt into our lakes and streams?
Yeah, so the salt issue is being researched by the Friends of the Muskoka Watershed. They have more research questions coming up that they need to look at, but they're learning more every year on this issue. As a part of the integrated watershed management thinking, what we hope to do is start to engage municipalities to look at how do you write contracts? How do you apply salt? And where can we look for solutions that are integrated with solving some of our other problems? But as far as I know, that process hasn't really started. I know a couple of years ago, we had the district chair had a working group on salt, and several local, I believe Muskoka Lakes was involved in this. Had a couple of public works people talking about the issue of salt, but we now need to get to the next step, which is management actions that can be employed in combination with solving our other problems, or at least mitigating or reducing them. So we're not quite there yet, but that would be the next step on that.
Thank you. So with that, I do have a question for staff. And I don't, but probably more appropriate to discuss with the Director of Public Works, who I don't think is available. So I'll follow up with him offline on that subject. The other questions, or I have two questions remaining. Matter of fact, the third one I'm going to leave too until the Friends of Muskoka complete their report. But the calcium and the decline of calcium. Years ago, they thought it was acid rain that impacted the calcium. We don't have, I don't think, the threat of acid rain anymore, but it appears that our calcium is still decreasing in our lakes. So the benthic are not getting what is required to build their shells or whatever. What can be done? Is this so huge that we can't turn this around? So I guess, is there anything that we can do?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. So again, the Friends of the Muskoka Watershed are key in doing the research on this, and they have their ash program that many of you would be familiar with, where they're doing experimental applications in some of our upland forests. There are two components to the problem. One is aquatic and one is terrestrial. And if the continued and ongoing research starts to show we can have a positive effect on a specific forest type by applying wood ash, that's one solution to one part of the problem. And then what we would need to do, again, integrating it with some of our other issues that are going on, is figure out what is practical for a wider application, and where would be the most important places to do it if we got involved through municipalities to do this, thinking about not only where it's been researched, but also in the aquatic environment as well. So that, again, is something that we need to move into. And in our thinking, we need to do it in an integrated way, thinking about the collection of issues and problems that we have coming on, because climate change is going to affect this. We need to know more about what's causing the blue-green algae blooms, because they might be related to some of the changes in aquatic food webs. There's a whole bunch of things that interact. Everything is connected to everything.
Thank you. Not a simple answer then.
Thank you. I see Mayor Kelley and then Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you, and through you. And I just wanted to respond to Councillor Edwards. I think I took a vow to the Friends of Muskoka Watershed not to talk about science, but I will point out that acid rain did decimate the calcium that was available. And I think left alone, it will take 75 to 100 years to recover. So it's not a current acid rain problem. It's a recovery from 50 years of acid rain, presumably that stopped 20 years ago, but is still a little slow to rebound.
Thank you. Question, Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. Through you to Kevin. Thank you very much for your presentation. A couple of questions. So I have. You sort of went in that direction. I've had concerns about some of the road construction that I've seen happening, and I'm not going to suggest just our highways, and sometimes even our private drives that people create because they might be water access only, that type of thing. And I'm not sure if there was a handbook developed and through the district, for instance, or through Watershed. And I'm thinking back, and I'm actually also wondering the days when we had the summits, which if anybody had never attended a Watershed summit, we had a couple of them, and they were quite incredible in my opinion. And you know, we had guest speakers from around the world at one time. I think that would be great if we could do that again. I know it's a pretty lofty, but I am wondering how to touch some of those other users that they have a better understanding of instead of just jumping into the back hole, they know what they're dealing with and even the effects of their dripping fluids from their equipment. So all of those types of things.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. There are best management practices, there are impact studies and environmental assessments, and like when new roads are being done, particularly public roads. But I go back to a couple of points from my presentation where you're very right in that this is a culture shift that we need in the Muskoka River watershed. We need to raise the public education level and also within all of our municipalities, and we need to create the political will to take a look at other options. And the other big piece of this is again, it needs to be integrated. We always run the risk when if we're building one road for one purpose, we miss other impacts and we miss other opportunities and bang for buck, basically. And that isn't typically done when roads are built. And the alarm bell for me rang recently with our climate action plans. Many of our municipalities are getting into those. And if you look at the recommendations or categories of recommendations individually, you'll see things like new infrastructure, raising roads, bigger culverts. They're all very single purpose. Some of them, the more we can do, the better. But some of them could be better designed with a watershed context that looks at things like, well, how is the salt flowing through here, through this area where we're putting the road, or what's going on with the calcium? And a whole bunch of other factors, hydrologic, flood sources, all those kinds of things. We need to think about those in conjunction with our infrastructure planning in general.
Thank you. Yeah, supplemental, and then Councillor Bosworth.
Thank you. Along with that, we have some issues in West Muskoka, primarily beaver issues. And I'm not clear, being a little bit part of this, I'm not clear that the best advice was available or given. And I'm not sure, again, is that because it certainly has affected the roads, but it's affected so much else, and flooding and else. And I'm just not sure that groups know where to go. And I'm not sure that watershed is the place either. So I'm just asking.
Yeah, thanks. The beaver issue is a complicated issue. When I first moved to Muskoka, I'm on Brandy Lake. There were lots of debates about water levels and beaver dams downstream of the lake and this kind of thing. And a local water quality expert once told me, Kevin, every one of these lakes, you'll get involved working with cottagers. 50% of the cottagers want the water levels to be higher, and 50% of them want level to be lower, and they will do anything they can with the beaver dams to get where they're going. And you'll also hear lots of debate about beaver dams holding back sediment and risking a blowout that takes out a road and all of this kind of thing. But there's, I would say, the bulk of the science, and I'm not an expert in this area by any stretch, but the bulk of the recent science, and it's going up exponentially, is leaning towards beavers being a benefit at a watershed scale because they operate with natural cycles and they work with water as a resource that ultimately affects holding back sediment, a lot of ecological issues, carbon sequestration, and the sourcing of floods. What we need to do is figure out how to work with those natural processes when we're placing or fixing or changing our road bases. And also know that, yes, there will always be the occasional problem with the beaver dam.
Thank you. Councillor Bosworth.
Thank you. Two questions. One is, you had a chart that showed rainfall trends, and the other one showed ice covering. What is going on with water temperature, and is that something that's important? My understanding is that that it is? And when it comes to ice coverage, do we understand the impact of bubblers?
Impacts of what, sorry?
Bubblers?
Bubblers, okay. Yeah, so on temperature, first of all, yeah, we just put a few examples in the presentation, but we are seeing an increasing trend overall with temperature in Muskoka. Lake temperatures are a little bit harder to discern, but the projections are definitely showing an increasing trend. It's not a clean straight line looking backwards to actual data because there's so many other complicating factors in what affects lake water temperature, but the trend is definitely there for us to see. It looks like the ice off timing isn't really changing very much. If you look back 30, 50, 100 years, ice on timing is definitely changing. And we don't fully understand the ecological implications of that yet, but we know they're there. And it's going to compound some of the other issues that are going on in our lake systems. Bubblers for winter ice and docks, where we're vulnerable, if bubblers are installed wrong, they cover too big an area, and in areas where we have wide, thin or vulnerable ice cover that could be impacted. So you have basically a bigger impact of one bubbler, and then combine those across some other cottages. You can have impacts from them, but I think the bigger one that I'm aware of is more on the the energy, the social issues, wildlife movement on the ice, and those kind of things. And then again, I'm not an expert in that, so I wouldn't go any further into that. But the bigger one that is concerning to the Muskoka Watershed Council is bubblers in the summer to prevent invasive or weeds, but it's actually native aquatic plants being affected in nearshore areas, and algae, and that, because those can be big problems if we start having too many in too localized an area and changing the ecological processes going on in the nearshore areas. So,
Thank you. Okay, committee, any other questions? Councillor Edwards?
Yes, Kevin, excellent presentation as usual. I have a few. First of all, the salt. Years ago, I read somewhere, I think it was Quebec, I'm not sure. Instead of using salt, they were trying to use sawdust and wood chips on the road for ice. Have you heard of any studies on that since? I'm going back about 6 or 7 years, I believe, that the study was done. That's one thing. And secondly, as far as salt and on the roads, I did hear something that there's more salt put on private parking lots like plazas and that than we're putting on the roads. We don't put anything into that as far as restricting it. Of course, there's liabilities for them. I can see why, but what are your thoughts on that? And the second thing was just to follow up on Councillor Bosworth. I seen an air photo of Cox Bay, which is up in Port Sandfield and on Lake Joe, that it was just about open, just center in the ice with so many bubblers around. And that was a presentation from the Muskoka ratepayers, I believe, years ago. So is there something in with that? Thank you.
Thank you.
The bubbler question first, that's sort of an example of one of the risk factors I was mentioning. If you have too many in an area where bubblers are sort of where the ice is vulnerable, you end up with a big bay that's basically ice free for most of the winter. So combined with the late ice on and the other things we're nervous about, that has to have effects. There's a domino falling there somewhere. We don't necessarily know exactly what it is, but it absolutely will be affecting at least the local part of the aquatic ecosystem. We just don't know to what extent or how yet. On the salt question, I think you'd be best to And I can probably refer you to some pieces of work that were recently done. Doctors Norman Yan and Dr. Peter Sale have done a great job of summarizing and presenting a lot of work, research on many different types of applications that can be done around different parts of Canada. Climate change is a massive factor in our ice application regimes, because if we have more freeze thaw or more warm weather, it's going to affect how much demand there is for some kind of applications to go on. And so we need to be thinking about materials, timing, and weather for those alternate solutions. We still end up putting salt on. Secondly, we have a big culture shift to go through. You know, people want to drive, and I saw this myself a couple of years ago, driving the North Bay. Highway 11 was hard ice. And I lived in northern Ontario for a while, and the roads were managed that way. But if you have people that still want to drive 120 and there's sheer ice on the road, there's a culture shift involved with us adapting to weather patterns and changing salt application rates. And then in addition to that, I think we really need to take a look at how we contract and how we apply salt, because there's economics involved with the contracts and the like. But on the private one, one quick little example, I think there's a little success there in that we have an example of collaboration happening where the private sector did buy into the idea of some salt application certification, Smart About Salt. And you had the private contractors buying in. I think it had limited success, but it was an example where a business sector agreed to get engaged in a process like that.
Thank you. Sure.
Is the Watershed Council recommending, I think it's called not bubbler buddies, where you put almost like a net around the boathouse? I've seen them advertised.
So, sorry, if you're asking if MWC is endorsing?
Well, yeah, like recommending so that it's not affecting wildlife as say and everything else like that. Just thought what your those thoughts on it.
Yeah, we haven't gotten involved in specific kinds of recommendations or technologies or anything. I'm sure there's many out there. At the moment, we would be more focused in kind of the higher level research on what the ramifications of different, extents of bubbling or and timing of bubbling would be. But we haven't drilled down to that kind of a level. And typically Muskoka Watershed Council doesn't get involved in one very specific project or issue or, private sector technology, that kind of thing.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions. I want to thank you, Mr. Trimble, for coming. Clearly, there's a lot of interest from the group, so thank you very much. And I think committee at this point, what we will do is take a 10-minute break and come back at 10:30. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
as well. Let's give everybody another moment to come back. Okay. Okay. I'll just wait another minute or so. I know that it was a bit of a tight timing, but clearly there was a lot of interest in our last, well, all those delegations, actually. The last one in particular. I had some questions, but I knew that we needed a break, so I'll save those for another day. Okay, we have Mayor Kelley, fantastic. Okay, welcome back, committee. I am going to move us along now to item 5A of Public Works. And just before we get into the next stage of our discussions, I think committee, we're trying to, in the spirit of being effective and efficient in our sessions, our staff are also going to be approaching, I think their staff reports a little bit different, a little bit more high level. If it's an information report, they may suggest that keep things to a minimum, but please still free to ask the questions. I know we've all done our preparation and reading them, but as we continue along, just note that the staff may take a slightly different approach than they have historically. With that, no pressure, Director Becking. You're on 5A. Nice and succinct. Thank you. Director Becking, we're on at 5A. Can you hear me? You are on mute. Do you want to text him? He's talking away.
There we go.
Okay.
You folks were muting me. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of committee. The first report brings to your attention some recommended changes with respect to the garden policy as it relates to liability and a different approach involving the use of waivers.
Thank you. That was very well done. Thank you, Director Becking. Committee, does anybody have questions for Director Becking? Councillor Bosenworth, Mayor Kelley.
Just briefly, what is being waived?
Thank you,
Madam,
Director Becking.
Madam Chair, the participants are being required to execute a waiver which will hold harmless the township from any liabilities as a result of the activity, howsoever caused.
Thank you. Mayor Kelley.
Thank you. And through you, I'm going to try and be as brief as you. I think you need to have another look at the way the policy describes the waiver. I don't want to over lawyer, but when you get a waiver from the CGG, you're not specifically asking for waivers from individual members. I think that just needs to be tightened up a little bit. The CCG is an entity and not a person. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Becking.
We can make that change, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Roberts. You're on mute.
For some reason, I keep on getting muted. All right, so can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Yes, good. Okay, I propose that in addition to requiring the waiver that from the gardeners, that the township also consider adding the additional premium of $1,500 to $2,000 per year. A waiver is good to ensure that the gardener will not sue the township. But what about anyone else who is injured due to an event in the gardens? What would the township exposure be if a gardener cannot cover the cost of the rewarded damages? And how may the township's insurance premium be affected if the township had to pay a significant damage claim as a result of the gardener's inability to pay the full damages?
Thank you. Director Becking. You're on mute.
Who keeps muting me? I don't if I understand the question correctly, what the counselor is suggesting is that the township take on the insurance responsibilities on behalf of the gardeners. And certainly that is an alternative if council wishes to go down that road. I think the issue that the counselor is raising is what happens if the gardeners can't afford to cover their responsibilities. Typically in actions such as these, everybody gets sued, and of course that would include the township. I understand from our insurers that the township is covered under such an eventuality. So I don't know that it's a necessary complication, quite frankly.
Supplementary, please.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes, no, I wasn't implying that the township take on the gardener's insurance premium. I'm suggesting that the township consider taking on the additional premium because that in the event that's true, that from my understanding is that they will sue everyone, and the township would be on the hook. They would be named, and I probably agree with you that not knowing the full details that our policy does cover this, but if there is a significant claim that rewarded, and the township had to pay most of that significant claim, it would probably impact our premium. So I'm just asking you to take that into consideration. And thought that these events have happened in the past with municipalities, but we'll leave it in your capable hands. Thank you.
Okay, just a reminder, because we are now shifting into, this is a focus on questions right now. I will read the resolution and then we can have any kind of conversation or debate. So just a quick reminder, even to myself. Councillor Zavitz, no? Okay. Councillor Edwards, a question? Thanks.
Yeah, maybe I'm not understanding this correctly. What they're saying, I believe, is that they've asked them to take $2 million liability, and they're asking us to, we're asking them just to sign a waiver on it so that there is no extra insurance charge. Is that not right?
Correct. Director Becking, can you confirm?
Yes, Madam Chair, that is correct.
Thank you. Okay, committee, I'm not seeing any other questions at this point. I will read the resolution, and then if there's any further discussion, we will open up the floor. Moved by Councillor Bosenworth, seconded by Councillor Zavitz. Be it resolved that council approve the amended community gardens policy as attached to report GF-2023-046. At this point, are there any further discussions? Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you. And through you, I just would like to acknowledge as a Ward A councillor to Director Becking and his staff that the Bala Garden Community Garden is established. Thank you for, the good work. I guess it started here at this chamber, but I might say that what a great solution this became. Otherwise, there was going to be no garden there. So Ken really dug in, and senior staff obviously put some things together. And thank you for that. And the folks that are growing tomatoes, thank you too.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor? I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Okay, Director Becking. Item
Madam, thank you, Madam Chair. The next report is an information report making you aware of some proposed changes to the vessel operating restrictions regulations under the Canada Shipping Act. The effect of which will be to introduce new requirements, assuming that the regulation is passed, introducing new restrictions with respect to wakeboarding.
Just a clarification, you mean wake surfing, not wakeboarding. I think that's a really important language that we all need to make sure we're clear. Wake surfing Do you want me to clarify or would you like to do that, Director Becking? Would you like me to take the lead on that?
Wake surfing behind
Seeing as he's
a
frozen,
moving boat.
I will take.
How's that?
I think I might take an opportunity just because I've actually had this question a few times, if it's okay. There are tow sports that happen behind our boats. We've all probably seen them or participated them at some point in our lives. There's tubing, there's water skiing, there's wakeboarding, and then there's a somewhat recent in the last little while, something called wake surfing. The first three fall under a category where you're usually going in a direct line and the wake is smaller. And that's a bit more of a traditionalist type sport. The wake surfing, these boats are being designed to create as large a wake as possible in behind the boat. It's a slow moving boat and it typically goes on arcs or in around circles. And those are those waves that we see that actually, because they're even going in circles, the intention is to make the biggest possible wave as possible. So I think it is important that as a council that we are, or committee, sorry, that we are understanding the distinction between wakeboarding and wake surfing, particularly as we are taking this, or if this is starting to be understood out in the community, there is a difference in these two sports. So I didn't mean to open up the question. It's just when you said wakeboarding, I just wanted to be sure everybody was clear. Now I see questions. I just want to make sure we are at questions. Oh no, this is information report. Sorry, information report. Thank you. Questions. I don't know who went first. I'm going to go Councillor Nishikawa, Mayor Kelley, Councillor Zavitz, and then Councillor Bosworth.
Thank you. Through you, I just want clarification, or not, I don't know if it's clarification. While this is for information, it's interesting. It does not touch this municipality. We don't deal with what happens on the water. We don't have policing. We don't have any of those things. I want it to be very, very clear that it is not this municipality's responsibility of the water activities that happen. So public, don't come after us. Because and the reason why I was saying it isn't just the wake surfing, because they are still trying to challenge the wakeboarding, conversation. But more importantly, I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that this is not this is a federal issue.
Correct.
Thank you.
I do want to ask Director Becking just to comment, because I do think because of this change going into next year, there would be a certain obligation as noted in the report for the township. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair, that is correct. Under the proposed regulations, there will be the ability for municipalities to request restrictions to the operation of vessels on lakes and inland water bodies within their geographic boundaries. If those requests for restrictions are approved by the federal government, then under the regulation, we would then become responsible for signage, for marking out the limits of the restricted area, and for enforcement, which in our case would be through the OPP, which of course is under the auspices of the district.
Okay, thank you. I believe it was, I just want to make sure it was Mayor Kelley, Councillor Zavitz, and then Councillor Bosworth.
Thank you, and through you, and just to address Councillor Nishikawa's comment, I understand from the report that it is actually the township that's making the application to have the regulatory change at the federal level. So in fact, it is the township that's initiating this process. Ultimately, it's not our decision, but I believe it's our name on the app. Here's the problem I have. I don't know what the consequences of success are here, because I don't know if wake surf boats are sufficiently unique to be identified. Do we know, do they look different? Do they run differently? Will they be, can you use them for different sports other than wake surfing? And will that activity be curtailed, or is it the boat itself that gets kind of outlawed? That's the kind of issue where I really don't understand what happens if this works.
Okay,
Madam.
Sorry, Director Becking.
Madam Chair, in response to the mayor's question, the change to the regulation does not affect the vessel. It affects the activity.
Thank you. Councillor Zavitz?
Yes, thank you. And through you, I guess, to the director. I have a couple of concerns, and I have a wake surfing boat. So the concern is nothing to do with my application. I do notice the restriction, if we go over to look at Appendix 1, Table 1, all of the restrictions that are indicated here, and I would ask Director Becking, this is my first question. Those restrictions to me are boilerplate now.
Right.
One isn't to have any boat within 30 meters of shore going more than 9 kilometers an hour, whether you're in the river on Lake Muskoka or in the Shadow River, wherever you are. So I would ask the director that first question. Are these restrictions hypothetical? They don't seem to be. Or is this what is existing? This is our current VOR restrictions as it says. So we're just looking at these and saying we would want the continuation of these in this new application. Is my first question.
Okay, Director Becking?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The councillor is correct. The appendix or the table 1 is a complete list of all of the VOR restrictions within the township of Muskoka Lakes. It currently exists.
Okay.
If this regulation or regulatory change is brought into effect, then the restriction on wake surfing will also apply in each one of these locations.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So the second part of my question then would be, we've obviously left out the Moon River. And the Moon River is one of the most critical water bodies in our township in terms of width of water availability and amount of people that live there and use that water for recreation. So I would respectfully ask that we add the Moon River unless there are some restrictions on that based on whether it's viewed as a floodplain or a flood basin or something. So I would ask the director of that question.
Yeah, I'm going to ask the question, Director Becking. This applies to the current VORs today. There is a secondary process. If you wanted to establish a new body of water area, there's I'm going to call it a VOR process that one needs to go through, correct?
You are correct, Madam Chair. If council chooses to initiate a new restricted area, then you must, other than what's in this table, you then have to make an application totally separate and distinct from what we're here speaking about today.
I think this is a good introduction of a concept called VOR that probably has existed for a while. And now there's a change. So separating the wake surfing from the other towboat activities. But it is a good introduction to us. I think we've heard about it from some of our stakeholder groups. I'm thinking of Safe Quiet Lakes in particular at some of their previous meetings. So I suspect we may hear more of this as in the coming years, right? But there is a whole separate, I think, very comprehensive process you need to go through in order to establish any kind of limited areas. So I see, yep, Councillor Zavitz and then Councillor Roberts.
Well, thank you then. Through you,
sorry.
I would respectfully request that be an adjunct to this motion or this movement today, that we consider strongly adding the Moon River. In fact, the Moon River in some places is no more than 100 feet across. And if I do the math, I mean, 30 meters off of each shore on both sides, you've got a stripe down the middle where everybody's going to be.
Yep.
So
I'm going to.
We should add it.
Yep. Okay. I'm going to suggest that our CAO would like to speak, and then Councillor Bosmore. Sorry, I didn't.
Madam Chair, and Councillor Zavitz raises an interesting question. I think my comment or suggestion to committee would be that typically those types of requests would come from the community, that waterfront community, and I would suggest we'd want to exercise caution that we're not trying to impose a regulation on them, because we could have some community backlash. There may be interest in doing it, But I would suggest that perhaps it may be more appropriate for the community to approach us with some kind of consensus, if you will, that this is a good idea for them. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Boseworth.
Thank you, Chair. I, as a counselor and also on the board of Safe and Quiet Lakes, am very excited about what this change will do in the regulations that separates wake surfing from the other tow sports. This is a problem in North America. There are many organizations in Canada, well, certainly Safe Quiet Lakes, and there are others in Canada, but there are a number of them in the US working on creating scientific basis for what are the appropriate places to be performing wake surfing. And I think this council will get lots of requests for areas where we should be doing it. There is a concept that perhaps there should be a provincial level VOR. All these ideas are being explored, but there are safety implications and environmental implications from this activity, and we need to do it. So this is an exciting opportunity. Frankly, I would like it if this council could see, or this committee or council could see an opportunity to tell the federal government that we are in support of this, because it's something that I think we will need. I will add one more point, that the Transport Canada recognizes that the process for making an application is very cumbersome. And they have a new project that they started in September, or in the fall of sometime in 2019, and it's called the VOR process improvement. And what they're hoping to do is that when municipalities come with an application of a VOR, if they apply before some date in September, and it's a successful application, it will be implemented by beginning of boating season in next year. So if that comes into place, that now we have, as long as you can get the application put together, and I will tell you, there'll be lots of support in our communities to help us do that, then we will be able to get some of these legislations in place if needed, if it hasn't been done at a higher level.
Okay, thank you. I see, hold on, Councillor Roberts and then Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to the director. I'm just, when I read the report, and maybe I didn't comprehend it quite clearly, but I think it did say that if this regulation was passed, it would be up to the municipality or township to actually place markers in the water, etc. If this is that a mandatory thing to do? Because if it gets passed, we would be if it was mandatory, be on the hook for significant costs to mark all these areas. So that's
yeah, Director Becking, I think you have noted that in your report, correct? That this cost would be.
That is correct, Madam Chair. Yeah,
it will have to be contemplated.
Yes, that is correct.
My question is it mandatory that we do it?
Thank you,
yes.
Director Becking. Thank you. Okay, so are there any other, oh, sorry, Councillor Kent. Oh, sorry, Councillor Kent, your mic.
Follow up for Councillor Bosworth. I may be really ignorant here, but these wake surfing boats go up and down the Little Joe River. I've never, I mean, wakeboarding, wake surfing, and I'm not an expert in this subject at all because we don't do it, but you're not going to wake surf in the Little Joe River. Like, I don't understand what this application actually does. It just says you're not allowed to, but I don't believe you can. I mean, maybe wake surfing, you go less than 9 kilometers an hour, but I don't understand what this does at all, because you're not going to be wake surfing in these rivers anyway.
So I am going to suggest that I will, if you would like to respond to this, but it's feeling to me like this conversation is getting outside of.
I'm just trying to get an education. I don't understand.
Yeah, the education. So it just a quick response to this, but if we would like to have Safe Quiet Lakes to come back at a future, maybe that's an opportunity.
I'd like to address another point, and for Councillor Kent, I suggest you and I can have a discussion offline. I can educate you on what that means.
Okay.
But with respect to the signs, today you cannot wake surf, water ski, or tow in the Little Joe River. That is illegal. We have no signs. We've never had signs. previous council, Safe Quiet Lakes, came and said, you don't have we'd like to have more 9-kilometer signs. This township funded the signs, and I believe Safe Quiet Lakes distributed them. So the cost was fairly minimal. So I when we get to doing this, I think we will find, my opinion is that the signage will not be a huge issue because you'll get a lot of help.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Ken, if you can just turn off your mic. Director Becking. Councillor Ken.
Madam Chair, just further to Councillor Bosenworth's comments. In the course of researching the matter and preparing the report, I did have conversation with the OPP, and they were expressing some frustration with the absence of signage and proper markers. And without some improvement, it draws into question their ability to enforce. And if they can't properly enforce it, then they won't, simply because there's no point in going to court to have it thrown out. So their strong feeling was that the township has to put in appropriate efforts and measures to make sure that the signs are in place and that they are clear and they are visible so that they can properly do their job.
Okay, so I just want to note that I think this will come back to us in the future if this all goes through and we are asked for funds. I suspect this will be part of a budget discussion. So I think this has been a great introduction. I appreciate that. Councillor Roberts, do you have something new on this? Okay.
It's not really new, Madam Chair. It's a continuation of my concern of the expense and exposure that will happen if this regulation is put in place. Because I think I heard Director Becking saying it would be a mandatory requirement. So I don't know. I think we should be sending a letter saying we're not supportive of it because I think it'd be significant funds to do. So that's my comment.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Mayor Kelley.
Excuse me, thank you. And through you briefly, whatever the cost of signage will be more than offset by all the wins in terms of protecting the shoreline, protecting the environment, protecting the vegetation. And so I'm quite comfortable that there aren't any combination of signs that's going to cost more than it will save us in the long run.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and something new, Councillor Nishikawa?
From everybody else, I'm not sure.
Yes, okay.
I just wanted to say, the reason why I've sat around this council table when in fact we've been told we could not put buoys in, we could not put signage up, there was a different councils, different governments put new rules in place. And so we were not able to do this for many years, I would say, because this came forward. I can think of 2 different mayors. And my hesitancy again, and I want to look at this a little bit further and discuss it with other, my hesitancy is to take on something that is a responsibility of the federal government because of those waterways. And we'll say, yes, the OPP will manage it, but I just want to have a better understanding when this does come back at budget of really, not only are we just being asked to pay for signs, but also putting up a sign, and then what is our responsibility? Because the reality is we don't have the ability to enforce or manage the activities on the water, in my opinion. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, thank you, and noted. Okay, thank you. Seeing no other questions or comments at this point, I will move on to item 5C, a verbal update from Director Beckett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sure as all members of committee are aware, Mr. Moore has taken up his new responsibility as the manager of Parks, Recreation and Facilities. And that has been met with a lot of positive feedback. And I'm detecting a note of pent up desire to move forward with all things parks and recreation, not the least of which is the implementation of the Parks and Rec Master Plan. I think all of that is wonderful and positive. That having been said, when one is inundated with requests from all different directions, it can be awfully difficult to maintain focus on the bigger picture and the high level things that need to get done before we can get down to dealing with some of the more tactical matters. I just wanted to give everyone a bit of a heads up that we will be coming forward to you in August with a fairly thorough report having to do with what we expect to get accomplished and where our areas of focus are going to be for the 2023, the balance of 2023. The annual work plan, of course, for 2024 and beyond will start to come through through the budgetary process and through the development of the implementation plan. I don't want to discourage people from bringing forward ideas. Quite to the contrary, I would strongly encourage it. I would ask all members of committee and council that they direct their comments through me. We'll compile a list and we'll try and incorporate those great ideas into our various work plans as we move forward. With that, Madam Chair, that's I think it for me.
Thank you. Okay, committee, are there any questions or comments for Director Becking? I see Councillor Zavitz and Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, and through you to the director. I've had a few emails and text messages about Hardy Lake lately, and I guess that speaks to usage based on the time of year and its condition. Are we, as a township, are we away from that as we've stated in our position, or are we back in the groove with the ministry and are somewhat responsible? Just kind of wondering what the status of that place is. Thank you.
Madam Chair, the MECP, Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, has fully taken over responsibility for the management of Hardy Lake. They have occasionally asked us to take on certain items of work, which we've agreed to do, mainly revolving around the parking lot and grading it as needed. But anything above and beyond that is being addressed exclusively by MECP.
I just because this is a topic that's a bit off of what we're have on our agenda today, what I might suggest though, Director Becking, this one's been a big conversation over the last couple of years. Perhaps we could do that as a future report to facilitate a good conversation. So everybody is understanding what's going on. Pardon me? Okay, Councillor Nishka is going to add one comment. Then I see Councillor Roberts has a question.
So I'm engaged with MECP on a regular basis. We did get some and I directed it to the right parties, and it was a very interesting email chain because off to you now, so and so, and they very, very quickly, like within 24 hours, they had gone in and done a cleanup, and they went in and put a porta potty in place. Those issues and so they are on the job is all I want to say. It is not the responsibility of the township any longer.
Great.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. I have a suggestion for staff. and start with a comment. It was my understanding that back when we were doing the 2023 budget and we approved the recreational manager, it was primarily to focus on the master plan recommendations. I understand that the new reclamation manager has another part of the job, which is the operational, and it'll take some time to get into that role. But after saying that, I want to ensure that to ask that the implementation plan or whatever you're going to come back with in August focuses on what we paid $100,000 to a consultant to do for us. Not to mention all the costs of staff and the public and counselors to create that report. This plan includes at the top of the list the 4 recommendations from the executive summary. We've already fulfilled the 5th one, but it needs a comprehensive implementation plan, which you're going to do. But immediate work on the foundation elements and defining those foundation elements. An assessment of arena futures, which I know that you've got the recreation manager working on. But the 4th one was the investigation of the possible grant applications that could help cover the cost. So I want to make sure that that focus is made, or that the director takes into the executive summary and tellers his August report to addressing those. Thank you.
Okay, so I do believe. Yeah, no, I think that's what we heard from Director Becking, is that they just need some time. They're going to come back to us with a report, and like many other stuff, that's an opportunity for us to continue to dialogue. And certainly as we go into the budget period, there's going to be a lot of interest in this space, which is exciting. It's exciting for the township. So I appreciate the comments. Is there any other questions or comments from committee? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much, Director Becking. Moving on to now item number 6A. Who is joining us here today? Oh, thank you. Welcome. Okay. Item 6A, Chriselle.
Okay, thank you, Chair Mazan, and good morning, committee. Before you is a report regarding an application the township has received for the sale of an original road allowance from abutting landowners. Staff are recommending approval of the application subject to the noted conditions in the staff report. Committee heard from one of the property owners this morning who spoke to the application, and with that said, I will turn it back to the chair.
Thank you. Okay, so committee, before I read the resolution, are there any questions for staff? Okay, seeing none. This is a fairly lengthy one, so I will read this and then we can open it up for any further conversation. Moved by Councillor Burry, seconded by Councillor Roberts. Be it resolved that original road allowance application ORA-03-23 Devons et al. Be approved, subject to the following conditions. 1, that the township forward correspondence to abutting landowner of the original road allowance to be closed. Roll number 4-11-040, requesting either a confirmation of participation in the transaction or a waiver of interest. Should the township not receive a response by the specified deadline, the failure to respond will be treated as a waiver of interest. 2, upon the confirmation of or waiver of interest from the landowner of roll number 4-11-040, a corresponding draft numbered reference plan of survey shall be prepared and provided to the clerk for review within 1 year of the date of this conditional approval. 3, that the township be in receipt of the following from the acting solicitor. 1, confirmation that public notice of the proposed disposition was published pursuant to Township Policy C-LS-06. 2, confirmation from the District Municipality of Muskoka of the registration of an easement in favor of the district for drainage purposes over the portion of original road allowance to their satisfaction. 3, confirmation from other applicable agencies that they have no concerns with the proposed disposition. And that 4, a road closing bylaw, a declaration of surplus resolution, and any related necessary documentation to effect the disposition. 4, payment of any applicable fees for the land costs, solicitor's time and disbursements, as well as confirmation applicable property taxes have been paid up to date. It has been read. Are there any comments or discussion? Okay. Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you. Through you. Earlier today, I think we heard on this particular file that it was once access to water. Am I correct?
That is what I heard. Perhaps we can ask staff as well.
Right, sorry, Chriselle.
I don't believe this particular road allowance once led to water. It did used to hook back up to the portion of Peninsula Road that is currently the highway right now. What I think the property owner may have referenced is there may have been an easement or something like that in the area, but this particular road allowance did not once lead to water.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you, that is carried. Thank you, Rochelle. Item 6B, Director Donaldson. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. So as promised, without delay, staff have started to turn their attention toward the 2024 budget, and attached is an information report summarizing the feedback we received during our post-2023 budget discussions, and provides an overview of this year's budget timing and discusses some of the external factors that are expected to impact the upcoming budget and guidelines. So including asset management and the setting of service levels, attracting talent, some of the economic factors that are still plaguing the world, and the issue of property assessment. So as outlined in the report, a guideline will be coming forward to committee in September after we have a public meeting to solicit ideas from the public with respect to their priorities, as well as having our online engagement through the survey on the Engage Muskoka Lakes site. So staff's intent is to complete the process and bring a final budget to council for endorsement prior to the start of the new fiscal year. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Director Donaldson. Okay, committee, are there any questions? Director Zavitz.
Thank you.
Councilor Zavitz.
Thank you, and through you to our director. Mark, I wonder, so one of the things I know in our debrief when you and I spoke, as you spoke to all of us afterwards, read the 2023 budget. One of the concerns I had was just out of the gate, and I expressed this to you. And I'm wondering, I read this report over a couple of times. I didn't see where I had a warm and fuzzy that we have got a slightly different or a more refined scenario to get to that starting point. So, you know, when you come to us at the first, you know, at the end of August or whatever it is, or September, and let's start at 5% or 3% or 8 point or whatever the number is. Can you explain sort of what everyone else said to you and sort of where you've landed on that reco for a more refined starting point, if you will, to the budget percentage increase?
Okay. Director Donaldson.
So I think with respect to the question you're asking about what I heard from the comment, that's kind of outlined in the report in the 5 bullets. I've tried to summarize it. And with respect to getting to a guideline, I think what we're trying to do and what we talked about with many councillors had the same comment, rather than have a public meeting at the end and have the public react, it would be more beneficial to have the public's engagement up front, find out what their priorities and concerns are earlier. And then when we consider that, bringing that forward as part of how we establish the guideline will be derived by the level of service and the things that council deems to be a priority in the year and the costs associated with delivering those. Obviously, the more we include in the budget, the higher the need for tax levy to deliver those services. So it's a balance. It's a discussion that needs to take place. But I think our starting point will be, you know, we start with what we currently do, what we expect the costs of delivering that service will be in 2024. We talk about some of the assumptions. We talk about some of the things that we're expecting we'll build in, and look for council's direction on how to proceed with preparing a budget for a presentation at the end of October.
Thank you. Councilor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I think my concern from last year's budget was more around this council table, that we didn't give a direction of what. So we would normally sit around and say, okay, we're happy to start at a 5% tax increase and just give the guideline. As councillors, we're telling staff, that's where our comfort level is now. Work with it and show us what that looks like. We haven't done that as a council at this time. So I think it is something that we should consider, because we're not doing staff any favors by saying silent on the item. We should give that initial guideline or percentage of what we want to stay within prior to them going back and doing a ton of work and then us trying to pare it all down. So I hope that we do get to that stage, and I'm not sure when and how we could look at that, at what agenda, but I do believe that this council needs to give, and we do this at district, we say, okay, this is where we're happy to start with at a certain percentage, and then get the information.
Okay, thank you. Director Donalds, I just see Mayor Kelley has his hand up. It looks like you want to comment, and then if needed, I'll defer it back to you.
Thank you. And through you, just to respond to Councillor Nishikawa, my recollection is that's absolutely how we did it last time. What isn't said is that we subsequently pulled it away back. So we gave fairly broad latitude. The first cut came in, I think, even at a lower amount, from a rusty memory, a lower amount than we initially anticipated. And even then we pulled it back another $300,000 or something. So I think that's consistent with how we've done it. And my understanding, that's how consistent with how we do it, or will be proposing to do it here. Although if I understand correctly, part of that initial envelope will be determined after public input and not before. Is that the how you anticipate? I'm asking, sorry, Director
Donaldson. Yeah, thank you.
And yes, through the chair, that's correct. So we'll do more information gathering. We certainly have our own information that we're sourcing to kind of look at what we're doing today. But we feel like getting more of that public engagement, both online and in person, prior to asking for the guideline, will help form a more complete ask in ensuring that we're capturing in that guideline everything that council wants to achieve. I think one of the concerns we've had, and that's certainly my experience the last couple of years, is we come forward with a guideline and then we end up adding asks at the end. So then that number continues to grow and to grow. And the hope is that this guideline will be an all-encompassing, here's everything we intend to include in that budget for presentation at the end of October.
Okay, thanks. Mayor Kelley.
Just a
and then our
quick
CIO.
supplemental. I love the plan. I think it's great. One thing that I'm curious, by moving the public feature to the beginning of the process, I don't see it happening again as the thing gets close to completion. Do you anticipate that after it gets roughed out and delivered up to council, there's no more public debate or no public meetings, or is it just simply delegation at the approval meetings?
Thank you.
Through you, Chair, I think that that's something that we can discuss as we move forward. But my vision at this point is we would not have a second public meeting if people had comments with respect to what had been proposed and discussed. There certainly is an opportunity for public to delegate at those special meetings.
So just before I hand it over to our CIO, I think this has been a good response to what you've heard from all of us and from the public last time. Was we wish that we had been brought in earlier, so we weren't in at the tail end of this discussion. So I think your new approach is trying to bring the public input in at the beginning. So thank you. CIO Hammond.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So I think the process that Mr. Donaldson is proposing is an ideal opportunity for us to hear from the community, but it's also an opportunity for us to talk to the community about some of the challenges that we're facing and provide information that the majority of our business is not based on CPI. It's actually based on a construction price index, which is a much higher increase than CPI because of supply chain issues. So I think if we can create that understanding, sort of identify where we're going in terms of addressing some of the issues we're facing, I think it's an ideal opportunity up front to sort of have understanding on all parts and then move forward with the budget. And then on that basis, I think we will know at that point who's interested in the budget process. We all know now because they typically provide presentations to us every year, but they'll have an opportunity to participate through that process because we'll be having special committee meetings and then boiling it up to council, hopefully, as Mr. Donaldson's indicated, prior to the new year. So that way if we have a budget approved prior to the new year, all that procurement that we need to do from a capital perspective can hit the ground running early in the new year. We can get it done earlier in year. Thank you.
Sorry. I had a couple of comments. I like the process that I know you've factored in a bunch of suggestions that we talked about. I think that before, per Councilman Nishikawa, before we sit here and say, yeah, we'd like to direct you to 5% or 4% or 8%, whatever the number is, it would be good if you brought the key parameters, the CPI, the building CPI, you know, any other metrics that are important, and I can come up with a whole bunch of them. What percentage is variable versus not variable, things like that, so that we can give you the most intelligent, rather than just saying, oh, it should be 4% out of the air. Give me the metrics up front that are going to base our consideration. Then we can take our most educated guess about what we're comfortable with. But last time, I don't think we had that data before that conversation. So if you could do that, that would be one suggestion. Number two, I felt one of the things that wasn't, as a newcomer to the budget process here, was we spent a ton of time on the marginal items. And the $11 million, don't correct me on the number here, $11 million capital budget, which was like the largest 13, 11, whatever the number was the largest number. And a lot of that is not variable. We have to spend it. But what I would like to see, so that we could actually spend constructive time on the capital budget, is information on the metrics that drive Mr. Becking's roads models. He has parameters that say, when it gets to this level of deterioration, we have to spend the money. So how much, what's driving this $13 million or $11 million? We didn't have any of that. We had specific projects, but the projects, you know, it's very hard for me to say, well, we haven't reached the metric yet, we can defer that a year, because that information wasn't there. So I'd like to spend more time on the big numbers and a little less time on the $2,000 for this hall board and $1,000 for this pickleball project. Those are important, but they're not going to change the budget. They're going to make constituents happy. So I'd like to make sure we understand the big stuff.
Thank you. I think our CAO would like to chime in first, and then if you would like to speak.
So Mr. Donaldson or Mr. Becking might want to chime in, but I think what you're talking about is service levels and identifying service levels. And as Mr. Donaldson's pointed out in his report, that's an important conversation that we need to have next year through a capital servicing level discussion. I think a financing plan will flow out of that. So council needs to appropriately set those levels, and then we'll be able to make those connections to the costs.
Council needs
Capital service levels. We have a service level now. It's kind of understood. Mr. Becking may want to correct me if I'm wrong or add additional detail, but I don't know that council has actually documented the service level or thought about it and looked at what the implications of it are, and potentially have adjustments or other changes in that respect.
But the service levels would be set by area or road or whatever it is. I know he has that data because I spoke to Councillor Becking about it.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd love to make that conversation more constructive by us getting to see some of that rather than just the numbers.
Yeah, and I think as CEO Hammond has noted in the report, it talks to that capital service level study. I'm trying to use the exact language to be contemplated in 2024. So all of the asset management, the core asset management, the non-core asset management, recreation master plan, fire, all of those things will form.
And I'm.
Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair, that's all background information to it. And I know that Director Becking would be happy to talk to you about the asset management plan. That's one of his favorite things to talk to people about.
So is the recommendation offline, or will that be coming forward?
So if you, Director Becking will be coming back with a non-core asset management plan early this fall. And he at that time can perhaps provide a bit of a review or prior to provide a bit of a review of our core asset management plan for members, the new members of council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Donaldson, did you have any further comment or for those?
No, not specifically, Chair, just to say that some of the economic factors are in the report. There's some links to Ontario budget and the stats can't. So that's and some of the external things. And with respect to the capital projects, one of the things we're trying to do this year is add a little bit more qualitative narrative around the capital projects that are being proposed. So there's a clearer understanding as to your point, what is the project? What's its current condition? Why is this necessary? That type of thing, to just give a little bit more background rather than a description or a title and a number, but really, you know, a more of a verbal update. There'll be more documents in the package that'll help to answer some of those questions.
Thank you. So supplemental, and then Councillor Zavitz. Councillor Kent, your mic, please.
With the list of all the roads and the projects, which I remember seeing last year, maybe it's something as simple as a system which might come out of your capital asset, the big plans you're doing, like 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is, oh my God, we got to do this year. 3 is pretty close. 2 is it can wait. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So that we have some criteria for deciding the big numbers, because we have no flexibility when it comes to us and no knowledge of why Director Becking is saying we need to spend this particular amount of money, and it's hard to provide any value.
So, pardon me? Yeah, Director Becking, I see you put your camera on. Would you like to just give a quick response or comment?
I guess I don't think it's appropriate at this point to be getting down into the details. I would be happy to sit down with any member of committee or council and share with them how we've done things in the past and how we move forward. Excuse me. I will be bringing forward the asset management plan to you in September or October, and we'll go through it in detail at that point. Excuse me. As it relates to you know, what's on the list, I can share with you the algorithms that we use, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. Councillor Nishikawa, and then did you have your hand up as well? Councillor Zavitz, you did as well, right? So I'll go Councillor Nishikawa, Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you. Through you, I just wanted to mention to the rest of the council that weren't aware. And in the old days, I used to carry around my roads need study. So they would actually be part of that whole document that Director Becking is talking about, that in fact, we had an idea when that study was put out, council sat around and our committee sat around and knew what roads needed to be done 5, 10, 15, that type of thing. So that is information that's in a book that honestly, it's a good thing to go through as a councillor, but that information is available to us. And in fact, in almost everything we spend money, there is another plan that's said, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you. Through you, I think one of the most interesting points here is item 2, property assessment, that shows that this township is 97% residential. Now I'm wondering, and I guess to you, sir, I'm wondering if we have a handle on, you know, all of the 444 municipalities in Ontario in terms of what the percentages are. It would be just interesting chat, that 97% of our stakeholders, shareholders in this corporation have a home here, many of which have a second home. I think it's like 90% that have a second home here. That we need to be really sensitive to that in terms of customer service level. You know, to the CAO's earlier words, it's a service level. You know, where are we now, and what is it the public wants? So I champion you putting in that public piece right up at the get-go. And let's hear from them, you know, and then factor that in from there. But, you know, I'm not sure if Bracebridge is 82% residential, and then there's a pretty heavy commercial because they have manufacturing and they have warehousing, they have whatever, car dealerships, none of which we have here. So I'm just wondering how we could factor that in.
Okay. Dr.
Perhaps not a
Donaldson?
question.
It's not a question or just a comment? No, okay. Councillor Boseworth.
Try to be brief. Just a reminder that I think we've agreed that we were going to try to find a formula to determine what the reserve fund balances or the capital reserve should be. And another point I would just like to suggest that we're always talking about service enhancements and new initiatives. I think we should be constantly, as any organization should be constantly looking for improvements. We spend quite a bit of money on software applications that should improve our productivity. And surely we have some initiatives that we started quite a few years ago and perhaps have very low utility. We should always be looking at, things we don't have to do anymore. No, not a question, just a comment.
Okay, thank you. Any comments? Did you want to? I think our CA would like to make one last comment.
So Madam Chair, I know there's interest in a reserve policy and we are intending on doing that. The quantums won't really be identifiable until we understand the what, right? That goes back to service levels and then the financing's the how. So I anticipate that we're going to have those conversations next year when we do the capital servicing study and the financing plan. The reserve policy, I know that's on Mr. Donaldson's radar as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I want to thank you. It seems to me in how you presented this that you've really done your work trying to listen to all of us as well as the public coming out of last time and try and set us up for a successful process. I personally really appreciated the schedule. It helps with fall planning for probably all of us to understand, when these milestone dates are going to be. So thank you for taking the time to do that. Moving on now to your next report, please. Item 6C.
Thank you, Chair. So the report before you is a legislated requirement under the Development Charges Act. The last update to committee was actually provided in 2020 for the period up to the end of 2019. So the development charge balances are actually included in the notes to the financial statements every year. So they are publicly available. But staff have been delayed in bringing forward a report that details the annual uses of funds for which this is. So members will note that over the past 3 years, up to the end of December of 2022, we've collected $974,303 of development charges with an additional credit of $93,817 of interest. And we have dispersed $1,187,274. As committee is aware, the funds are used to pay for costs that support growth in the township. And that includes studies and plans to address how to deal with the impacts of growth. Staff will be proceeding with a joint RFP for services this fall with the neighboring municipalities for a new development charge study. And that will be the basis for a new bylaw in 2024, which will actually be in 10 years, or a 10-year duration, rather than the 5-year duration we've had in the past due to legislative changes under Bill 23. So that's just information of what's coming with respect to development charges for the township. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Committee. Any questions? Councillor Edwards?
Yes, as far as the development charges go, how often can they be adjusted? Is it 5 years?
So through you, Chair, so there is a provision in the bylaw that they can be adjusted for inflation annually. And we have not historically done that. I know the district does that. We actually haven't. So what we charge today is what we actually bylawed in 2019.
Okay, because I know like the district are given a 50% discount at this time. And it's costing millions of dollars to the taxpayers.
Okay.
And I just wondered, we haven't actually reduced our charges, have we?
Through you, Chair, we have not reduced our development charges other than what would be legislatively required with the new legislation that's come through with respect to the building of multi-unit homes and that, but we've not for regular residential, no.
Okay, so we haven't. We're still charging 2019, so we should be looking at bringing that up.
And through you, Chair. So in 2024, when we do the new development charge study that looks at our expenditures over the next 10 years that would be eligible for growth related development, then we'll determine what the new rates will be proposed to be when that study comes through for the new bylaw next year.
Okay,
The current bylaw expires next July.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much again for providing these reports. I appreciate it. We all appreciate it. Moving on to item 7A. Are there any questions or comments on the library minutes? And seeing none, we will accept those. Thank you. And we will move now on to item 8A, economic development. Welcome, Director Pink. This is fun.
Good morning, committee. As you will see, the staff report in front of you, and as you will recall, staff has been delegated authority to apply for grant opportunities as they arise. And for most community improvement plan initiatives, we previously indicated that most would not proceed unless we were successful in grant opportunities. I'm pleased to advise that we have received correspondence that we were successful in 3 applications. One for the downtown street furniture initiative and 2 for the downtown interpretive signage, totaling just north of $26,000. Staff recommend that I be authorized to execute said agreements and move forward to release those funds. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. So I do have a resolution in front of me, but before I read that resolution, are there any questions for Director Pink? Okay, Councillor Zavitz, Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you, and through you to Director Pink. I just wonder, in terms of this is obviously great news and excellent. Thank you for staying on the ball on that. Where would these benefits be viewed? For example, where are we putting the Muskoka chairs at 8 places? 3 in Bella, 3 in Port Carling, etc. So just I'm wondering locationally, where does the benefit to the township go?
I would have to, through the chair, I don't have the exact details at my fingertips. I have to review the plan and speak with Mr. Moore on that further. However, there is street furniture, both garbage receptacles and benches proposed for both Bala and Port Carling in the urban core. And as well, the interpretive signage, you likely know in both communities, Port Carling and Bala, there's quite dated and inconsistent historical signage. And the funding for that project would look for a consistent, unified approach in both communities and signage throughout. So we'd be replacing those signs that you see and adding new in those communities.
Thank you.
If the committee wishes the precise locations, I can certainly look into those and get back.
Thank you. Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. Sorry, through you to, I might have to stretch this out. My question first would be going to Councillor Re as our financial guru at district. No, I want to have an understanding of the whole district application. And I'm reason why I'm not putting David on the spot, because it's really more of a question about. So again, we applied for a certain amount. We only got a certain amount, if I read correctly. And my concern is that in my recollection, our municipality has not been successful our municipality hasn't asked for active transportation funding in the past. And I'm curious, and knowing also that this $10,000 was already funded by this municipality by 40%. I'm trying to have a better understanding of the active transportation account discussion at the district, and even if that comes into consideration, because I was told, for instance, if we wanted to apply for a grant in that way, that the municipality would have to put up 50%. And I'm just wondering if does that conversation happen?
So I'm going to actually ask Director Pink, because what we have before us is just authorization, correct, for this, but is there an opportunity for us to understand this? And now I'm seeing the CAO, maybe he would like to chime in to help on that.
So I don't know if Mr.
Thank
Pink
you.
wanted to lead and I can add, or did you want
I think I'll leave it to you, but I can note that we have received funding from this in the past. What comes to mind is the bike racks and stations that were implemented, I believe, last year. So we have been successful in applying to this fund in the past.
Thank you.
So I think to the second part of Councillor Nishikawa's question, I believe your question was dealing when you talked about 50% funding. So I believe that if a local municipality requests the district to widen roads during construction projects for the purposes of active transportation, so district roads, if we request that, they will include it in their capital expenditures, but we would have to pay 50% of that widening cost. I believe that's the case.
Okay, thank you. Okay, supplemental.
I was aware of that, but there's something missing in here, and I'm going to have to look at it much closer because I don't really understand. In some cases, I question whether this is the right approach, and if again, what are we getting from the district? And should we be trying to look at this in a larger picture? So I'll discuss it with district councilors. Thank you.
Yeah, it sounds like an opportunity. Maybe the district chairs when you guys the councilors get together. Okay, are there any other questions on this particular topic? I will read the resolution and then we can open it up for further discussion. Seeing none. Okay, moved by Councillor Edwards, seconded by Councillor Nishikawa. Be it resolved that the Director of Development Services and Environmental Sustainability be authorized to execute all external funding agency grant documentation as required for the following projects. 1, downtown street furniture at A, Rural Economic Development Program, RED, in the amount of $13,500. 2, downtown interpretive signage project, A, District of Muskoka Active Transportation Fund for the amount of $10,000, and B, RTO 12 Partnership Fund in the amount of $3,000. I'm opening it up now to the floor. Are there any further questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you, that is carried. Thank you. Okay, Director Pink.
Thank you, committee.
Oh, yes. B and C, I have you down. That's correct. And we don't have anything in unfinished business. So what I will say is you will be gone for a little bit and I will have somebody come and get you. How about that? Okay. Thank you. Okay, Director Pink.
Thank you, Chair. And again, the next matter on the agenda is a community improvement plan private business incentive program application for the property at 61 Joseph Street, quite close to the township office. As the committee will recall, that community improvement plan was approved during the last term of council, as was a related policy for a private sector business incentive program and related monies in the township budget for the program. An application has been received by the said owner to convert an oil burning furnace to a new, more efficient propane unit. The proposed grant is just north of or just under $4,300. Staff is of the opinion it does meet the related policy and does recommend it be approved and an agreement entered into. Available to answer any questions.
Thank you. And so before I read the resolution, if there are questions. Thank you. Councillor Zavitz, Councillor Kent.
Thank you. Through you. I just wonder, as these it looks like they're going to be continuing to come throughout our year. I'm wondering if there could be a piece at the end that shows a cumulative, how much we've spent, what's available, what's remaining, if you will. Just would be helpful to know that so we didn't have to go back and how much have we spent? Is there anything left? Is there more money, et cetera? So for that.
Director Pink.
Certainly, if applications come forward in the future, or if committee needs, I just have to speak to the treasurer, but we can provide a remaining balance of the funds. I think there still is a healthy amount remaining to date.
Great, thank you. Councillor Kent. Your mic.
Relates to the question I had last time we brought one of these applications forward, which I support. But again, it appears that this is a business, not a consumer facing business, and we're doing internal work to improve their internal building rather than anything on the outside of the building. And I was wondering, looking back at the policy, which stream you were putting this through. And again, I raised the same issue, and there's two of them, which is I don't see this as improving the same way I don't think improving the floors of a bakery are really our problem. It doesn't improve the external facing experience for the community, particularly with an investment firm. And the last one was an insurance firm, same complaint. So I was just wondering which stream you put this under and what your thoughts on that were, because I thought we decided that at some point the policy would come back. I know it's soon. We haven't gotten to that yet. So
Thank you.
So thank you through the chair. And I'd start with certainly noting that the intention is to come back as previous discussions to review after the year, and we can certainly discuss about continuous improvement of this program. The stream is the building structural and mechanical upgrades stream, and it does explicitly note upgrades such as plumbing, electrical systems, safety, fire protection, structural upgrades, et cetera, new technologies, HVAC. So it does clearly fit within that stream. I think some of the concerns noted in the previous application, it was, again, there's a difference between, again, I think the program is to invest into the vibrant community and support the development of the buildings, not so much necessarily the particular business that is currently occupied. I think the concern in the previous application was it was currently an office. I believe there are 2 office buildings in 61 Joseph, a surveyor and a lawyer, but there, I believe, is also a retail establishment, and it is zoned to allow a number of the commercial uses that are identified in the policy. So it is not external facing, that is correct, but the program does include grant opportunities for building structural and mechanical upgrades, which does fall under.
Thank you. Okay, I see Councillor Burry.
Thank you, through you. David, or Director Pink, given that these applicants are getting money, are we encouraging them to go beyond? So I heard propane. Did we encourage them to look at better insulation and air source heat pumps, given that they're getting a sizable contribution from the municipality, which would certainly give them a decent payback as opposed to just putting in the same old junk? Are we encouraging them to use that newer technology?
Through the chair, I personally didn't participate in the pre-consultation or discussions on this application, but I would like to think, and I've certainly speak to staff, that would be part of the discussion. I think, again, part of the grant opportunity is a nominal or a substantial investment to encourage those future upgrades and continuous improvement of these buildings into the community. And I think that's a reasonable part of discussions that I think should occur and hope would happen.
Thank you. Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. I'm on a bigger question because sorry, through you to David, my concern with some of the information that Sally had brought up as well. I'm concerned about us not reviewing this policy prior to next year's budget. I have not been very pleased with the way that, if I just read essentially that we're trying to support businesses 365, all of those things. And so far, I haven't seen the monies that we are granting to businesses that are out open for 6 months of the year. It doesn't, I'm asking, when can we revisit this policy? I don't like that it's a year out or whatever that date is. I really want to revisit it before next budget season. And so I'm a little bit concerned that we might be putting some promises out there that in fact we may have a change in policy.
Thank you. Director Pink.
So with respect to timing, it's certainly my intent, one of the first tasks. So the new economic development officer will likely be to be included in the budget. Again, there's certainly no obligation to release them, and they would be reviewed against that updated policy. So even though the budget may come slightly earlier, any applications received next year, would be reviewed against an updated policy. So I think we do have some time. I don't foresee it as a lengthy review. Obviously, we went through the full approval process and policy. I think this is a refresh and update based on what we've learned through the year. With respect to the operations, as you know, the municipality can't dictate or control one's business operations, but I think at least the money that is being recommended I think is a step in the right direction, and certainly, hopefully allow that building and future tenants, future owners to at least contemplate a year-round use as opposed to an older, less efficient oil burning unit that may be less cost effective to stay open 12 months. So although you may not see it imminently or currently, that year-round use, that's the goal of the program, or one of. And I like to think that this application helps that intent.
Thank you. So I just want to be clear that as far as the actual CIP program, the policy, that is coming back to us at a future point for all of us to have learned from a year. Staff will probably be coming back with some thoughts and recommendations, and we'll be able to have that conversation. But in front of us today is going to be, this is one of 2 applications that currently comply with our current policy. So I just want to make sure that any questions before I read the resolution are specific to this application. Is that correct?
That's exactly correct. To just clarify, not the community improvement plan itself.
I'm sorry.
To come back, but the business incentive program policy would come back, and that lays out the streams and how, what is eligible for funding and how it's released, and those types of details we certainly intend to bring back hopefully later this year.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that. Okay, so questions on this particular application, because it's the first of 2 for the same location. So are there any further questions before I read the resolution? Once I've read the resolution, we can have a discussion. Okay, seeing none. Moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor McIntyre. Be it resolved that CIP Business Incentive Program application CIP-02/23 outlined in Appendix 2 of Staff Report CED-2023-15 be approved, and that the Director of Development Services and Environmental Sustainability be authorized to complete the financial services agreement on behalf of the township. Now I'll open up the floor to any kind of discussion. Councillor Kent.
I would just supplement.
Sorry, just your.
I would just supplement my comment is that what the part that irks me and bothers me is whether or not, and it's a philosophy question, we should be providing money to private businesses to do their internal renovations. That's really what I'm getting at. And I've now seen 2 out of 3 of the applications that have come forward have been for just an insurance company than this. And I can see it with Field of Greens a little more than I can with the insurance company, but I'm concerned about the precedent and the fact that I'm worried that the next ones that are coming in are all going to be private. Once you've done it for this guy, oh, good, I can get $10,000 to renovate the inside of my building. So when we come back, I think that's the philosophy discussion. Yep. What qualifies, what feels right as a community incentive program versus doesn't feel right.
Okay, thank you. So to this particular application, are there any further discussion? Okay, I've read the question. All those in favor? Thank you. That's carried. Okay, Director Pink.
Thank you. Committee, the last matter is very similar to the previous application, so I will keep it very brief. It's the same property. Under the policy, they are permitted 2 applications or 2 streams per year. What is proposed is a power washing, sanding, scraping, painting of all of the siding, soffit, fascia, eaves, windows, doors, frames, etc. of 61 Joseph Street. The grant amount would be in the amount of just south of $8,000. Available for any questions.
Thank you. Okay, so are there any questions on this application? Okay, I'm seeing none. I will read the question then. Moved by Councillor Zavitz, seconded by Councillor Roberts. Be it resolved that CIP Business Incentive Program application CIP-0323 outlined in Appendix 2 of Staff Report CED-2023-16 be approved, and that the Director of Development Services and Environmental Sustainability be authorized to complete the financial services agreement on behalf of the township. Are there any further comments, discussion? Okay, seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. That has been carried. Now, committee, I am mindful of time. We have a bit more on our agenda, and I was wondering if we need a quick comfort break before coming back.
Let's go.
That's why I'm asking the question. I'm hearing for 2 of you. I'm asking if anybody would like a comfort break.
Can we just go and you can start? I just have to use the washroom for 2 minutes.
Can you please turn off that mic? Thank you. Okay, We are about to go into the new business section. Folks, I am going to suggest we just come back at 5:12. It gives us like 8 minutes for anybody who needs to take a quick comfort break, and then we'll be ready to go. Okay, thank you.
Yep, we're good to go.
We are good to go. Excellent. Thanks very much, committee. We don't have anything under unfinished business. We will be moving directly on to 10A. And as a reminder, Mayor Kelley will be recusing from items A and B. So the first is electric vehicle charging stations. We had 2 delegations earlier today on those. And I think I heard from the CAO, and maybe you just want to perhaps guide us as to how we could proceed next steps. I think that might help our conversation.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I would just simply suggest that committee may wish to refer the matter back to staff, and we can come back with a report with some options for you.
Okay, is that a good idea? Do we, hold on. I think we need a resolution, and our clerk has finally pulled one together for us. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Burry, seconded by Councillor McIntyre. Whereas committee received delegations regarding the installation of electrical vehicle charging stations on township property. Now therefore be it resolved that staff be directed to review the proposals and report back on potential next steps. All those in favor? This carried. Oh. Okay.
Thank you, through you. We months and months ago, we had I guess, an approach from Swift River out of Bala. And so I just, if we're going to fold in the 2 presentations today, we should be including them as a consideration. I'm not so sure that resolution you've just read doesn't exclude them, but it doesn't include them either. So just for what it's worth, and there may be others. Right?
And I think that to your point,
So Madam Chair, I would just add some clarity here. I think whatever approach we take, whether it's a request for proposals or one-off, dealing with things as they come along, anybody can step forward with respect to those 2 approaches. And just another point of clarification, that resolution was the procedural bylaw in action.
the procedural. As noted yesterday, it's important for us to have a resolution to give very clear direction to staff. And then everybody is feeling like they're doing the right things. Look at us, we are getting better. Okay, I did call the question and we already voted it. And then, next one is the item 10B, the fee waiving for service groups. And we do have a draft resolution as noted. I think what I should do do we want to have an introduction from the people who have done it, or do you want me to read the resolution and then open up for discussion? Okay. Moved by Councillor Edwards, seconded by Councillor Nishikawa. Be it resolved that staff be directed to review the fees and charges bylaw and bring back recommended changes in regards to waiving all fees for township service groups. Now, if I could open it up for conversation discussion. Councillor Nishikawa.
For many, many years, I've sat on a committee that decided what was going to happen with our community centers. And we had a very, very fulsome group that determined what we were doing. I think its interpretation of what we decided to allow is lost here. I'm a little concerned that this particular resolution speaks just directly about staff. And I do believe that a counselor needs to be involved in that communication. There has to be history. There has to be history and how we've dealt with our community centers and things in the past. And so I just really want to not forget that the reason why the committee in the past was made up of counselors was, in fact, we were taking into consideration past use and other concerns raised by the public.
Okay, thank you. I believe the CAO would like to chime in.
So Madam Chair, I think the intent of the resolution is that staff would come back with a report so that the entire committee can have a conversation about it. That said, if there are certain members of council that have that historical perspective who would like to inform staff with respect to that section of the report as to how we got here, certainly I would encourage that.
Okay. Councillor Edwards.
Yes, we have been giving money back for years, and it means that they hand in a check for half. It has to be processed, then they come hat in hand, ask for it back, we give it back. It's all the staffing time through Treasury, putting a check in, giving it back out. And that these people are taxpayers in the community. They're volunteers in the community. The money they raise goes back in the community. Why don't we just make a policy that says there's no charge? I don't even think we need a staff report at this time, but if that's what you want, fine. But they should be looked after. It's plain and simple, and that we're losing volunteers. You don't have enough people for hall boards because one, they don't and not get recognized. They make recommendations, they're ignored. And that's so I've asked different people, why did you try? Well, they never listened to us. So that's fine. But what we should be doing is saying, if we had to hire people to do some of the programs that volunteers do, we couldn't afford it. So I would say service groups that are raising money should be waived directly. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any Councilor Roberts?
Thank you. I support a staff report, but in the staff report, I would like to see a clear definition of what a service group is. And what would be the qualifications to waive. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have read the resolution. I am now going to call the question. All those in favor? Oh, no.
Just through you, as I look at the question, I mean, there's a couple of issues to it. Waiving all fees. I mean, is there by degree? Is it something that staff would look at it waiving 50%, or is it a graduated scale? Or and I guess the other thing is it for community centers? Is it for arenas? Is it for all of our township facilities? I just would ask clarification of that as well.
I could make a comment, but I think it's better that our pardon me, Director Becking. Is that what you suggested?
Sorry, Madam Chair, could you ask the councillor to repeat the question?
Okay.
Thank you. And through you to the director, I guess I would ask, what is this for all township facilities, just community centers or and arenas? And I guess I would also look at the second part of the question is we use the word all is used here in terms of waiving all fees, you know, not knowing how much that represents into our, you know, our financial condition, whether that's $3,000, $50,000. So I don't think we have enough information to draw a parameter unless we get an answer from.
Yeah, and I just wanted clarity. Maybe I can help on that, Director Becking. Will that be included, that the responses to those questions in your staff report coming forward?
That's correct, or that's my understanding, Madam Chair, is that we'll take a look at all of our policy as it relates to the waiving of fees.
Yeah.
Right now, the policy is quite convoluted, and it probably is timely that it be brought forward and considered.
So today isn't the day to be making any specific decisions. All we're doing is directing staff to come back because the policy, if I recall, is quite comprehensive, and it will be the beginning of a good dialogue, I think, on our user fees. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Another question before I
comment.
Councillor Kidd?
I just was hoping that the report would also give us, as you referenced, the history of the fees, where it came, maybe not 5 years worth, but how much have we been doing this? So we have some context for what we're talking about. So maybe 2 to 3 years of history from Mark would be helpful.
It's about thank you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I think in the staff report, that will be a good starting point. Today, we're just directing staff. Okay. Councillor.
Thank you, and through you. Just because we're privy to, let's use pickleball as an example. We happen to know through the dialogue at our budget that the Pickleball Association, I think, puts forward, I don't know, $14,000 to $15,000 in rent for the arenas that they use to play their sport. But that's augmented. I know the township, if we were to charge a full fee, it would be a lot more than $14,000. Will that be contemplated in the director's, I guess, report that shows the augmentation? So, so it gives us that full financial sense, if you will.
Thanks. So Director Becking?
Madam Chair, I'm imagining that it'll be a comprehensive report.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards?
My interpretation of a service group is somebody that, like the Lions, Women's Institutes, that are raising money, giving it back to the community. It's a little bit different if somebody's renting it for, say, pickleball or
Right.
tennis or something like that. A service group is a volunteer group that are actually serving the community as a whole.
Okay, thank you. I have read the question. At this point, all those in favor? Thank you. That is carried. Okay. The next, oh yes, thank you. We're just waiting for Mayor Kelley to come in. We will be going into C and D. And I think similar to what I just did, I will read the resolution first, and then we can have a discussion. I'm just waiting for Mayor Kelley. I think I would like to give him a moment because I think. Hey, welcome back, Mayor Kelley. We are approaching these next two I will read the resolution and then open up the conversation versus having a prelim to it. So moved by Councillor Zavitz, seconded by Councillor McIntyre. Be it resolved that the Council of the Township of Muskoka Lakes requests the District of Muskoka considers a flashing warning light at the intersection of Muskoka Road 38 and Muskoka Road 169. So I've read the resolution. At this point, I'll open up the floor for conversation, questions or debate. Councillor Zavitz?
Thank you, and through you. I guess for context, there was a major accident on the Sunday of the long weekend at this particular intersection, which is the T intersection on 169 and the old Highway 38, former Highway 38. And it's not the first time. And in fact, I had a couple of local folks who have been T-boned there over the years come forward to me and point out, begging for some sort of remediation at that intersection, that being a flashing light, I guess similar to what we have in Torrance and in and around this township. So the reason I put this forward, and certainly my good friend Councillor McIntyre seconded it, was to simply draw attention to it, that we could ask of the district through our Public Works Director to inquire as to getting that
Okay.
And so Director Becking was kind enough to provide a little bit of insight, and here we are. So I would hope we could get support for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, are there any other comments? Questions? Okay. I've read the question. I'm going to call all those in favor. Okay, that is carried. The next one is moved by Councillor Zavitz, seconded by Councillor McIntyre. Be it resolved that the Council of the Township of Muskoka Lakes requests the District of Muskoka change the broken median line to a solid median line from Long Lake Road to Torrance Road on Muskoka Road 169. So I will now open the floor back up for discussion and context. Thank you. Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you. Through you. Again, this came up in discussions with Director Becking. it's almost like it just has gotten by everyone, but as you traverse Highway 169, come around the curve on your approach to the CN train tracks, which is where our ball diamond is in Dog Park. There is a series of dotted lines inferring that you can pass on the way to the train tracks, and it's never been made into a double line. It's a solid line going towards Bala, dotted line going towards Corinth. So you can actually pull out and pass, and people do. And we just changed the speed limit to 60 kilometers all the way along. So people are passing at 60 kilometers an hour, directing themselves towards a train crossing on Highway 169. So it just seems like it's just, this is more maintenance than anything else. It isn't quite from Long Lake Road to Torrance Road. It's actually a very narrow gap, if you will. I wouldn't know, 100 meters or so, but I would hope we could get support on that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Councillor Nishikawa?
Thank you. I'm not sure how to form this into a question.
That's okay. This is debate now.
So again, I'm getting different feedback from the community. I don't get the positive, this has been a great thing to turn the road over to 60. And I would also say, let's not just look at this. You cannot pass from Moon River Road to Torrance now. And it is creating, and those of us that are out at 7 o'clock in the morning going to a job site, and Mary Ellen has experiences coming to council, like that's when a lot of our contractors are trying to get to work. This is going to happen. This is going to keep happening. And I just don't want to ignore the fact that there is a large amount of people out there that feel that this is going to be a hindrance. And I'm just putting those words out there because that's the way it's directed at me. It would have been better, in my opinion, when I've brought things forward, when I've asked for a change at district or whatever, I've actually had some community members back the ask. And again, my concern is that most people won't see this, or they'll comment about it afterwards. Is it a safety issue? Absolutely, probably is, but I'm not the expert. I'm just saying that there is a whole different group of people out there that think differently.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Zavitz?
Thank you, and through you. I'm not sure what that has to do with this ask, but I mean, that's a whole other thing. And if this group wants to reopen the whole idea, the whole notion that the speed reduction shouldn't be that way. I mean, I hear it too, Councillor Nishikawa. And, I would just say, I guess, public safety. And if you look at the whole thing, I hear it like you do. In fact, somebody passed the other day right towards me. I'm going 60 kilometers and they're going at least, 110. So, there was just bad driving behavior. That's not for me to decide, but this particular ask right here is a dotted line inviting you to pass, right approaching a train track at 60 kilometers an hour. So right now it's ridiculous what it is. It's a traffic, it doesn't even make sense. So I think it's just closing a loop here. That other thing of 60, 80, whatever the speed is, that's not what we're talking about here.
Sorry. Thank you. Sorry, you couldn't hear me, Councillor Roberts. We did also have our supplementary agenda, the discussion on the IWM, and I made a note to myself, CAO Hammond, to add something in here if there was a next step that we wanted to include, or if there was some further comment from you. I think it was maybe in relation to yesterday's conversation as well.
So, Madam Chair, timely that this followed the conversation we had yesterday with respect to a working group for integrated watershed management. So simply, as committee had directed, staff are going to come back, or the Mayor Kelley and I will prepare an email that will go out to council, and you can provide your working groups back to me, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item E, the district updates. I am going to start with Mayor Kelley, Councillor Nishikawa, Councillor Burry. Specifically, Mr. Burry, Councillor Burry, and then Councillor Edwards. Mayor Kelley.
I don't, right off the top of my head, have one. Thank you.
Okay, that's succinct. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest, and I hope others appreciate that, that in fact our district updates might get changed slightly, because quite frankly, I'm just coming to you and saying we're spending a crap load of money on health services, and I don't know that there's anything specific that I can bring anything different other than saying we keep approving. So for instance, we just had to do a meeting to approve concrete. I'm just saying a lot of money, but I don't know. What I would like to hear maybe from other councillors is events that they actually attended, and if there's some benefit of that. So I did want to take this opportunity and I did ask the chair if I could do this. I wanted to comment on some of our staff members who really were outstanding, in my opinion. The road work on 169 was a really large challenge, I would suggest. So we had both at Medora Lake Road and then of course the paving in Bala. Tim Sacco from Public Works, and I've been around for a while since he'd been around, but I never really got to engage with him as much as I did on this particular topic. He was outstanding, getting the information out to the public. And there was a real good effort made between Public Works with the district and our Public Works to really get all of the messaging out there. And there was constant communication having to go out to the public, because the public was saying, well, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing it? There was always challenging. So some of you may have known the Medora Lake Road project ended up taking a day. It wasn't as big and bad as was all put out there in social media and things like that. So I just wanted to say outstanding to Tim, and I also want to take that about our fire department. You know, so some of you know that I had the fire chief hike in to more than half an hour into Crown land because they were having a fire. Concerned me greatly. They took care of it. Awesome. But also they had a fundraiser this past weekend in Bala for, I learned 3 different groups that that the fire department was extending funds out to in helping with medical costs and those kind of things. And I'm going to challenge council and anybody else on the call that in fact they may wish to give some donations, particular to that drive, because while it was a good effort and they did a good job, and I believe there was $2,000 raised, it could have been so much bigger and better. And I would just suggest, I'm going to challenge you all to donate a little bit to those funds in our department, fire departments, because it is going back out to some of those members that need, and we heard about one particular member that had a 55-year service pin given, who is now going through cancer.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you. It is always nice to shine a light on some of the great work that happens. Hold on. It's always a nice idea when we can actually shine a light on the good works that happen. So oftentimes we do find ourselves immersed in the details because that is a big part of our job. So I do appreciate you bringing that forward. And if there, I think Mayor Kelley would like to also make a quick comment, but just before I hand it over to him, I think what I'm hearing, and I have also been the recipient, is our ever-growing communications is really the support that probably happens in behind the scenes to support a much more customer-friendly approach to things. I think we're starting to see that. And if I could just add, even on the fire, as we were through the fire ban, certainly members of the Milford Bay community had expressed some real concern. They just experienced a fire on Huckleberry Rock 10 years ago, and we're in a deep fire ban. And I would say within 24 hours, some really well done, highly impactful, simple signage to help remind people not to set fires really help that community. So I just, I know Kayleen's not here on the call right now, but perhaps I could say through you, just good work. And we look forward to kind of continued work in that space. So with that, I think I want to hand it back to Mayor Kelley because he has his hand up, and then we'll get over to you, Councillor Burry.
And thank you. And through you, I don't know the right order, but I will tell you, excuse me, I was very pleased on the weekend to see on social media that our own Councillor Nishikawa was being rewarded for all of the work that she's done on behalf of the township in the service of the Torrance Barons. And so I was going to encourage Councillor Nishikawa to hold that up with some pride, maybe fill it up with something. You know, this role, any of these roles, exposes us to daily criticism and commentary, and it really is refreshing to read about the Clear Lake Association or Cottagers Association, is it just Clear Lake Association, acknowledging the commitment and the hard work that you have put into protecting that piece of very, very important real estate. So thank you very much on behalf of council. Are you getting ready to take a picture, perhaps, Councillor McIntyre? No pictures? Okay. Well, thank you very much.
We'll do pictures later.
Just wanted to extend, congratulations and thank you for the effort.
The candy dish. It's great. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And at this point, I think I'll turn the floor back over to Councillor Burry.
Thank you, and through you. So the district is spending a boatload, technical term, of money on health services. $30 million more than they're going to be reimbursed by the province of Ontario for Fairview, which we pick up 38.5% of, which is why I think they don't mind spending more. So at Corporate and Financial Services, we had a delegation from Safe Quiet Lakes. Colleen Kennedy came and spoke to us, and it was excellent, well received by the district. I think there are district councillors that do not understand some of the issues that we have on our big three lakes. So that was good. And we actually raised speed as an issue with the new carbon fiber boats with 1,200, 1,400, 1,800 horsepower on the back that go about 140 miles an hour, I'm told. So we raised that with Colleen, and I don't think she was really aware of that. So we're, again, communication. On good news, the financial statements for the year end were approved, and it was a successful and clean audit, which is always really nice. The investments at the district are actually pretty well managed by One Investments. They've got stuff in tiered pieces, so we've got the report from that. Their reserve funds are just a little under $200 million, and we're asking for the same kind of materials we're going to get from our staff as to how are they aligned in the asset management plan. So putting a little piece to the fire. And then we had the annual review and update of the district of municipality general user fees and charges, and we got to approve how much the airport charges for the advertising in front of the washrooms. It was which is one of the reasons why we're trying to get the airport put into a municipal services corporation as opposed to having 22 councillors directing the directors. So there's lots going on at the district. I continually am concerned about how much of the district budget the Township of Muskoka Lakes pays. And I'm probably not going to stop that until someone kills me.
Thank you. Okay. So Mayor Kelley would like to comment as well. Thank you.
I would thank you and through you, and I want to pick up on the Fairburn thing. We don't need to litigate that here. That's a decision that's done and finalized, but it's going to be a theme that you will hear a lot of from, certainly from me, I think certainly from Councillor Burry, I'm sure from Councillor Nishikawa. The issue, if we keep putting everything down to how much we spend, we're really ignoring the real equation, which is how much value did that generate, did that spending generate? And so the point that was made, and I think it was made loudly and clearly and by more than just me, was the money we spent at Fairburn using the provincial standards would have taken 225 to 240 people off of a 7-year waiting list for space in a senior's residence. Because decisions were made, nothing kind of fell in our lap. We didn't wake up one morning and realize people were spending more money than we thought. We made conscious decisions to build beyond the basic standards that the province has authorized. And as I understand it, no expert, the standard to which 98% of all of the builds in the province are being done. Because we chose to go beyond that, we only managed to get, is it 170, 168 people off the list. 160. So 160 people off the list. So the shame isn't that we spent 30 million more. The shame is that we spent enough money to put 75 more people in a secure environment where they were getting the appropriate level of care they needed to live out the rest of their lives in comfort, and told those 75 people, a waiting list is still, you're still on it. And for how long, who knows? So the point from me, and I know I'm a broken record on this, and I will be when we get through budgets as well, has less to do with the gross spend and more to do with the value. Are we getting something of equivalent value for the money that we're spending? In this particular case, I don't think we did. So that's the this is not a purely an accounting exercise. We have human lives in play here, and it might have been nice to take another 75 of them, or whatever the number is, off of an extraordinarily long waiting list, 7 years. For the same price that we're paying to house 160 people. So that's the difference between the money spent and the money that perhaps could have or should have been.
Thank you.
And I'll just pile on with the airport, which has an annual subsidy of somewhere around $2 million, although it's very difficult to find out because they bury the dump truck in the fleet budget, and it's complicated. And one of the reasons why we're pushing to get a municipal services corporation is that you can actually hold the CEO accountable to some key performance indicators and say you have to balance the budget, and you don't just come back to the district and get a $2 million subsidy that's being spent for, some general aviation and hobbyists by and large. It does have some commercial activity, and there are lots of good reasons why one wants a municipal airport. But $2 million subsidy is $2 million that's not going into food or housing or other kinds of programs that would help the constituents of the district. And so, there's all kinds of these things that we're finding. And thankfully we're not alone, that we're going to try and see if we can't somehow, I like to use the word optimize, because that's where we're going to get the biggest bang for the buck.
Great.
But it's big, it's complicated, and not going to be easy.
Thank you. Councillor Nishikawa.
Thank you. And very briefly, I just wanted to add, because I think it's important the way the conversation went. One thing that I've learned, especially over the last year, is that in fact, long-term care has changed. The way that I knew that the Pines was run, that in fact, you could apply to go in there at 65 and live out your life and live it coming and going, like, that was more retirement living. It's not that anymore. So it really is down to almost the desperate last years of a person's life. And the reason why I bring that up is because I would suggest that the model that was chosen to build was more on a retirement living scenario as opposed to a long-term care home scenario. And we'd have to look at that, but it's again, a bigger conversation of people to understand what services we're providing and what do the bones behind it look like, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Edwards, you're waiting so patiently.
Thank you very much. He had a presentation from Macaulay Treehouse. There was some funding for just a minute now. Wide early learning and childcare update. And there was some money coming in from that. Total expenditures basically is it's gone up another 91,000. And so it's coming in at about 3.6 million. Rapid housing. There's 18 units and they're building that at 6.7 million, which includes 2.7 million or a 40% district contribution. And they've raised that up now to 8.4 million, which is the district will be paying $3.35 million. And then we had a special meeting on OPA 57, which is the lake studies, which you all know they've added 5 extra lakes. And that is my report.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? No? Thank you very much, District Councilors. We appreciate it. Moving on to a new item on our under new business, and this is an introduction. And just to expand on this, I think Mary Ellen has provided, Councillor McIntyre has provided us a best-in-class example of what this is intended for, which is just there's an event coming up, it's in the community, there's the time, the date, the location. So that way it saves all of us following back up afterwards saying, hey, can you remind me when that was, where that is and everything else. So that's the details. But there's always this opportunity to expand if there's something happening within the community and you feel it's important enough to share during our council meeting, so or our committee meetings. So this is intended kind of forward looking. If there's an event and you think it warrants being on here, let's just keep introducing it. And that is just another way to also communicate out to our community that it's on our radar. So that being said, thank you very much, Councillor McIntyre, for leading the charge there. If anybody else has any other community events, okay, Councillor Edwards.
I believe I put a notice on the a notice board downstairs, but St. Thomas Anglican Church is having a yard sale and barbecue on Saturday from, I think it's 11 till 4 or noon till 4. And that's on the D Bank Road, right over by 141. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any others?
Oh,
sorry. Sorry, would you like to just?
Foots Bay Regatta on August 6th for people who never get to Lake Joe.
Thank you. Is that the day of most regattas, I think? Is it the long weekend? Yeah. The regatta weekend, that's gonna be a fun and busy weekend for those on the lakeside. That's great. I guess everybody, to be honest. Anybody else? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much. I don't see anything else under general correspondence. I think I seen anything else. I'm being handed this resolution, which is fantastic. Moved by Councillor McIntyre, seconded by Councillor Kent. Be it resolved that this meeting adjourn at 12:45 p.m. And that the next regular meeting of General Finance Committee will be held on Wednesday, August 16th, 2023 at 9 a.m. or at the call of the chair electronically from the council chambers, municipal office of the Port Carling, Ontario. Just before I call this question, Mayor Kelley, when would you like us back for council? 1:30? So at 1:30 p.m., we will resume today's meeting. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. I've read the question. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. Have a great day.